This is still, if you look at the agenda today, you'll see a lot of species selection, basic principles and stuff like that. You got to kind of start somewhere and work your way up. We can't dive right into all the craziness and all the fun stuff immediately. So bear with us. A lot of this stuff's kind of rudimentary, but you got to make sure that everyone here, that you understand everyone's on a different level. And you want to make sure everyone's kind of brought up to speed. Certainly don't want to leave anybody behind in that aspect. But this is just aquaculture, aquaponic system principles. Nothing crazy, but we'll certainly go over what we see here. A lot of the ones that are applicable to Ohio, ponds, at least can be. Ponds, aquaponics, your traditional RAS, RAS, things like that. Pretty much just talk on about 4 of these. Biofloc will be very, very brief, but these are the ones that most folks tend to have or at least interested in this class. Just a couple of the culture systems, nothing super fancy, but you can do a lot of your smaller tanks, 100-gallon or so on your recirculating systems. Those tanks should look very familiar to you because they are what's back there. But you can use those with just your RAS or your aquaponics. And these are actually what they call vats, but they're essentially just flow-through systems. There's no filters or anything with a system like this. Water comes in one end, leaves the other end, leaves the farm, either dumps to ponds downstream or it might just end up in the river next to it. But these are one-way systems. You can see a pipe coming down right here with the water coming in. That's just water coming in, water leaving out. The only filters it might be here is if all of this is actually well water. So if your well water is high in iron or something like that, you might have, or high in CO2, you might have degassing chambers that go through and just let the water, the well water run over it to help bubble off some of that CO2 or remove the iron. But other than that, flow-through systems are pretty basic, pretty self-explanatory. Definitely most common with, most commonly found with your trout systems. I'll start at ponds, kind of work your way down. Average size here in Ohio is certainly an acre, but as you talk to folks around you, there'll be people that are half acres, but there are also a few folks with a lot larger ponds. Not very often, not very common here. But this is Shrek. Hopefully she sent out all those links to a bunch of different stuff. I know some of them were broken. We're sending you the same place, so if you don't have those up to date, let me know. But that's the Southern Regional Aquaculture Center that I sent you a lot of links to. And this is their Shrek 101. So this is their most basic thing, and this is just pond construction stuff. But there is a certain, there's a lot of differences between, of course, the South and here. A lot of times here you'll have 6 to 8 feet, and a lot of that is winter refuge stuff. But you can see they offer, or they're recommended, at least on their, of course this is catfish, but it doesn't really matter. But they're saying 4.5 feet, very, very common here, and 6 to 8 feet for that winter refuge when it gets brutally cold out there. And then this was mentioned earlier. I know a lot of folks are interested in aquaponics, but I've already gotten questions about this from a few folks. There is a trade-off between erosion and weeds. So if you see, as you go out 3 feet, you drop 1 foot. That's your 3 to 1 or 1 to 3 ratio right there. So as you're stepping out down to the levee of your pond, you want to go down however many feet. The trade-off between the erosion and the weeds, if it's straight up and down, everybody knows if you ever seen a pond and you got good wind action, next thing you know, you just get that pond eroded over, and eroded over. Next thing you know, your 6 to 8 foot pond is now 4.5 feet, and you no longer have that winter refuge. So you want to make sure it extends out long enough so if you have wave action up here, the ponds are going to last a lot longer. But you also don't want it so flat that the sun actually penetrates all the way down to the into the soil, and you've got a lot of weed problems. So there is, even though there's a lot of seeds that might be in this embankment right here, because of course the water level runs to here, but even though you might have a lot of seeds right here, if you have good plankton blooms, which I'll talk about in a second, and proper ratios, so the ponds are built right, you can help kind of shade off some of that pond, make sure you only have the good weeds that you do want, as Bill's talked about a lot, and not so much a lot of the other bad weeds. So definitely a trade-off between erosions and weeds there. And then lastly, they recommend in between each of your ponds, you can see a little better picture in another slide or two, but in between, so you've got a pond here, That's an outside levee, but you can run another pond beside it. They're recommending 16 feet right here, and a lot of this is because of tractors and because of erosion, especially if the ponds are wet when you're out there trying to work. You kind of wear out that levee very, very quickly, and it kind of degrades that. But if you're just walking, if you're just walking or you're using a small little vehicle to get through here, you can certainly go smaller than 16 feet there. But you just want to be careful that you don't get so small that this erodes very quickly, and next thing you know, you just spent all this money or devoted all your own time and effort to build the ponds just to turn around and have to redo them. So basic stuff as far as construction, but it's pretty popular. This is a little bit more, I try to find something kind of from our north central region, but almost all your ponds are certainly going to be drainable for a lot of different reasons. Not just the south, but anywhere. You definitely need at least 20% clay. You need to be able to compact that pond down good and tight, because if you have poor clay content, your ponds are just going to seep constantly, and water's just going to run out of your pond. You're going to be constantly filling it back up, and it's a lot of wasted time, wasted energy, and you're never going to make any money if you don't have good clay content wherever you're trying to build your ponds. So test the soil. There's a lot of places you can test your soil, pretty basic stuff to find out clay content on there. Those words are awfully small there, but it's just a standpipe on the inside where the water is. Got a drain valve, a clay core right here, and then the water can go out either into the creek next door or however it might be. But certainly have the opportunity to be able to drain it when you do need it. Certainly going to help you. Another Shrike pub, just gives you a general idea. That's at 16 foot I mentioned in between the two ponds. But if you do have a well on site, and these are large ponds, these are 20-acre ponds, which we're not going to see. But it kind of gives you a general idea, general layout. All of them have the drain pipes. You see where they all kind of come off from. But these smaller ponds, these are 20 acres. We don't have to worry about. But these 1-acre ponds are so much easier to manage. Definitely. So it's one of many reasons that you'll see a lot smaller ponds here compared to a lot of other places. A lot of our ponds here are going to be levee ponds, but I guess you probably do have some watershed ponds here. Levees is definitely what you're going to see when you're looking out and everything's just flat. These have all been built up intentionally. Your watersheds are going to be probably at the bottom of the watershed, and they just built a huge dam. Those are definitely a lot deeper ponds. Usually they turn into lakes, especially down south. But there's a big difference in how they're constructed here. The watershed is relying upon, it rains, everything runs down into the pond, whereas a levee, everything is flat. You're using well water to pump in, but everything's a lot more manageable there compared to some of your other systems. Ponds, definitely a lot of trouble with predation, even up here. There's a lot of birds and stuff that I mention here in a minute, but you got to worry about biosecurity. Theft, vandalism, not quite as much, especially if they're small ponds right next to the house. It's a lot easier to look after, but they are much more forgiving than indoor systems, and hopefully I mentioned it here. They're forgiven for a lot of reasons, and this is not a super great picture, but it gives you kind of an idea of generally how your ponds work, kind of the basic principles of it, how things all work. Everything works because of photosynthesis. For those of you who are interested in ponds, definitely got to pay attention to this type of stuff. You know, even from going out here to Bill's ponds or wherever you might go, two ponds sitting right next to each other might be completely different in color. That can be turbidity, phytoplankton, a whole bunch of other things involved there. But phytoplankton, well, they're fixing nitrogen and phosphorus, but it really kind of starts with your phytoplankton. These are microscopic plants. They are a lot cooler looking. If you just Google phytoplankton, there's a lot cooler images that have been taken than this generic graph. But these are your basis. These are your microscopic plants. They're using photosynthesis to take up your carbon dioxide and during the day produce your oxygen. You got zooplankton, or actually microscopic crustaceans, which crawfish, stuff like that, are also crustaceans. But these are microscopic guys. They'll go on and feed, and it's a very, very basic. Aquatic food webs and food chains get very, very complex. But in the most simplest form, these guys eat these guys, baby fish eat these guys, smaller fish eat these guys, and then the predators, of course, eat there. then of course you come along and catch them out of your pond and eat them or sell them or whatever it may be. But a lot of your species, your larval fish, your perch, there's a lot of good videos that Paul and some of the others have done and posted on some of the websites. The larval perch feeding, early feeding stuff, that Vimeo, I don't know if we've sent that out yet, but it's certainly be a good thing to view. But it shows Paul down at the station growing rotifers and Artemia to feed to the baby fish. Because when you are indoors, you don't have the luxury of letting sunlight develop your phytoplankton and letting that chain go. You got to create it artificially, which I'm sure he talked about those little beer refrigerators that are down there and where they're housing the live feed. So pretty cool stuff there. Nothing crazy though. But this is certainly the truth. The pond breathes in and out one time a day. Another strack, yeah, I guess I did do that. But dawn, midday, dusk, midnight, dawn. You see hard lines, your DO, and the other line is your CO2 line. So in the morning, right before sunlight, that's definitely, I think, already been mentioned, but that's when your oxygen is by far usually going to be the lowest. And Eugene, if you're at OAA and saw his talk, he gave a very good talk on aeration in these ponds. But at the very earliest, that's when your DO is going to be the lowest. That's when your CO2 is going to be the highest, which really isn't a problem for most ponds. And then, of course, right before it gets dark is when your DO should be the highest. That's because you have the phytoplankton there. Photosynthesis only occurs when there's sunlight out, right? So during the day, they're constantly producing oxygen and using up CO2, all that phytoplankton right there. And then at the end of the day, they've pretty much added as much oxygen into the pond as possible. And then when the night time goes down, now those same phytoplankton, those same zooplankton, baby fish, predators, and any other organic matter that's there in that pond is going to be using up oxygen the entire night. So right when it gets dark, everything starts to drop off because everything that's organic and that's breathing and using up stuff in that system is going through pulling out the oxygen out of your pond. That's why you're definitely going to be worried, and you should be measuring DO more than once a day, but you certainly want to measure it first thing in the morning and keep those records so you know if today it's 7, tomorrow it's 6.5, and 2 or 3 days from now down to 5 and down to 4, something's going wrong. You probably have a phytoplankton crash or something like that. These guys are no longer producing enough oxygen to be able to sustain your system. So instead of it being here, it might be, which this doesn't really give you a concentration over here, but first thing in the morning it might be a lot lower over there. So just recording, as mentioned 1,000 times, recording your water quality parameters so that you can predict and know what's happening with your pond systems there. Your basic photosynthesis stuff, your oxygen is being produced. It's everybody learned this pretty much growing up. But I mentioned they're a lot more forgiving, but you are at the mercy of Mother Nature. So fish are something called poikilothermic, so they are not self-regulating. Our body temperature, 98.6, 98.7, some of us run a little hotter, but fish are only determined, their body temperature, how they are able to react is all dependent upon the environment. So if you have a fish that takes 3 or 4 years to grow before it actually gets to a market size, well, you can certainly cut that down further if you can make sure everything is optimal 365, right? It wouldn't take 4 years, 3 years, 2 years to get there. If everything's optimal, they're fed optimally, the temperature's optimal, pH, everything else, they will, of course, be a little less stressed, metabolism be a little bit better, and they'll get to harvest a little bit faster. So if it's too hot or too cold, here, I guess it does get too hot on some species, but for the most part, it gets too cold. What was it, like 190 days maybe of yellow perch growing season? The reason it's not 365, it either gets too hot or too cold. They're not growing nowhere near as well because you start to get a little stressed, not enough to kill them or anything, but as it gets either too hot or too cold, metabolism tends to slow down a little bit. They're not eating as much. If they're not eating as much, they're not growing as much. So kind of basic stuff there, but you certainly got to consider how, I guess the last thing I threw in, just a last little bit there, was considering how you're going to harvest in things like this, in systems like this. That was really it for ponds. If you got a question, I'll take it. If not, we'll switch over to RAS. Yes, sir.
Is that going to be talked about later on, or how do you prevent that in the pond system?
It depends on what it is. Things like cormorants, we used to have, I don't know if Bill still has a permit or not, but it depends on, a lot of it depends on what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife say. If they say you can kill 1 a day of whatever animal it is, or 2 a day, or you can't kill any, there are definitely non-lethal measures. That's almost kind of like firecrackers that are sometimes allowed. But if U.S. Fish and Wildlife says you can't even do that, then you're kind of at the mercy of Mother Nature and stuff like that. But I mean, here it's less of a problem than it is in some of the other areas, particularly we're talking about migratory waterfowl, other fish-eating birds, things like that. But you certainly run into trouble with snapping turtles and muskrats and everything else too. Really, whatever U.S. Fish and Wildlife says. Depends on what your species is, and if they let you do it, then you can certainly take, as long as you're within the law. RES is certainly a good bit different. If you're here for that, I gave a recirculating talk at the beginner OAA workshop back in October. So some of this hits along the same stuff. I mentioned with the phytoplankton, you're relying upon, not exclusively, but a lot of that's coming from the phytoplankton. That's where you get the bulk of your oxygen. RAS is certainly different because you're indoors and removing Mother Nature as good as possible. But general descriptions, just land-based aquaculture system. You're of course going to recycle and reuse. A lot of people are interested in sustainability and blah, 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 all that type of stuff. That's what RAS does, is attempt to reuse the water as much as possible. And then on the last little bit, it's not super well defined because a lot of this depends on how much water is being actually expelled each day. If you have filters on there that are going through and cleaning the water, eventually those filters have to be cleaned. And when you clean those filters, you're going to lose water. So that whole 100% efficiency stuff's not very often the case. You can have small additions to your system, but rarely will you have 100% efficiency and never lose any water, especially when it comes to evaporation and stuff like that too. Not super thrilled with how this was portrayed, but it does give you an idea of the way a lot of people think about stuff. This is SRAC 451. They talk about if you're averaging so many pounds, blah, 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 you can get equal to about 0.005 pounds of fish per gallon of pond water. The problem with, which is, as I mentioned down here, gets a lot higher, but here this is really a difficult concept because what they don't take into effect is they're counting, you harvest the fish one time, you drain the pond completely, which depending upon the manager, whoever's running that system, the pond may be drained that one time and then refilled with well water later on. But this is SRAC down in catfish country where it's all done. A lot of these farmers don't drain their ponds for 20 years. And they're reusing the same water year after year after year. So that 0.05 or 0.005 is certainly not representative of most of the industry. But their take on it, or what they were comparing, was a pond system. As I mentioned, they're very forgiving, so you got a lot less pounds of fish per gallon of water usage there. And then in RAS, folks who know a lot more than me said that you ought to be able to hump close to, well, I think that says 0.05, but it should be a half pound. Sorry about that. It should be a half pound, 0.5, not 0.05. So you should get a pound of fish per 2 gallons of water, a lot higher density than that, I apologize, but to improve your economic viability. So that's a great difference between the intensity levels of these systems and what you have to be able to achieve to definitely improve your chances of success in these systems, which certainly means a lot better filtering mechanisms and really spending a whole lot of time to go through and design your system the right way so that water can be as clean as possible to keep the fish as stress-free as possible. Because of course I already mentioned, as fish are stressed, they're not going to eat, they don't eat, you don't make money, you don't make money, you go out of business. It turned up worse than I thought it was going to on here, but 20%, greater than 20% is not very common. As far as the exchange rates and all that is really based on, you have these filters here that are going through and cleaning your water, but those filters have to be cleaned themselves, so there is a bit of back flushing and waste with an RAS. It's not a perfect system with an RAS, but it does give you a good idea. So average 7 to 15, 0 certainly not very common at all. This was already done once, and it's online, and it's about to be recorded and online again, so you certainly don't have to memorize all this. But you think about how intensive and how much stuff's going on with the typical RAS and how much more complex that they can be, and considering to building a pond with proper dimensions, adding aeration and feeding them and letting the pond kind of take care of itself. And something like an RAS, there's a lot more going on. You got plenty of stuff going into your fish tanks, plenty of stuff going out. So you got to consider aeration, all your different types of solids, all your types of filters are here. Of course, disinfection if you need to, which you probably should, and then CO2 removal there too. So there's a lot of different moving parts, and it's a lot more complex than your typical pond systems. But I guess if I should have mentioned, you need essentially a type of filter here. You need types of filters here. You need types of filters here. This is really a type of filter because it's removing a lot of pathogen in your water. And here's other types of filters. The whole reason, but I got several reasons there, but about half the feeds consumed, that is consumed, is excreted as solids. Anyone who's raised any fish yet, certainly see that developing in your system. So by being able to have a bunch of different filters that are doing their own special components, it really ups the capital costs, it really ups the complexity of the systems, but everything becomes a lot more efficient. If this is only doing this, if this is only doing this, there's probably better ways to go about it, and I hope these water engineers come up with a lot better stuff. But for right now, you need a lot of different filters that are going through. I'm only pulling the big stuff, a clarifier, and then I've got something that's doing this, something that's doing that. So you got to spend a lot of time figuring everything out, designing it the right way. But they're a lot more efficient when they're actually size specific there. A lot of other stuff that was already mentioned. Water quality is hit on every day, which is certainly very important. General water flow in RAS. Already, this was also pulled from that other talk, but it gives you a good idea just how general stuff goes. Most of your fish tanks aren't rectangular like this, but it sure made it a lot easier for me when I was built this. I think this was also just pulled off of Shrek or one of the classes, I can't remember, but it shows you where most of the water comes out. Your settable solids or things like clarifiers, which they also use in aquaponics. A little bit of the water goes there, most of it goes to fine solids and goes back through. Then you can disinfect, add your makeup water, do your sludge treatment. That's, your clarifier and water's coming out. That's that really heavily concentrated uneaten feed and fecal matter that you want to remove from your system. Same thing in aquaponics. You need essentially kind of a sludge treatment, same thing as RAS. Remove that heavy stuff because in aquaponics you really want a lot of these minerals that are broken down. You want to utilize those. Whereas RAS, they're going to continually break them down into something that's not harmful to your fish. Same general concepts. Once again, you don't have to memorize anything because hopefully you're doing your homework in between every day or in between every month and are going through and revisiting some of these PowerPoints. Same stuff I just mentioned because we hit on migratory stuff or predators earlier, but a lot of stuff is your either residents or your migratory waterfowl and fish-eating birds. Those are a huge headache. And it can of course also be snakes, turtles, otters, humans, all those types of things. This is actually a decent sized bluegill that was pulled out of the esophagus of, I think, a lesser scallop, so a diving duck. In that research there, of course, they've got a lot different predation on their systems, but we pulled, I think the max was 23 bluegill and red ear out of one tiny little duck at one point in time. And of course, if you're in the kind of the Mississippi Flyway, you might have hundreds of thousands visiting your farm, and so that's when stuff like depredation permits really come in handy to be able to scare off birds when you need to and take what you can. A lot of positives with RAS. You can limit your pathogens. Best source is because you're using, you want to use your groundwater whenever possible. Surface water usage is a risk. We can talk about that all you want to. And things like that can be its own talk, talking about aquatic invasive species or pathogens that might be in the water. So using that groundwater whenever possible helps limit a lot of that, which is what a lot of indoor systems use. Of course, we get in aquaponics. I got 5 minutes. This is a long talk, I guess. But most already figured out this stuff, and you've seen most of them. Deep water culture is what we have back there. It's what Fresh Harvest Farm has right here, and if you go to the workshop, you'll certainly see their system and how they have it set up. The ebb and flow system, which is just the simple design back here. You'll see a couple different ways to run your bell siphons, but you'll see how that's set up in a little bit. Your NFT, I believe Brad Burnford and them are designing. Is that gutter system going to be like a nutrient film technique system over there next to strawberries?
It's still going to have some soilless media in the
Well,
yeah, you can look at that. It's a similar.
Yeah, some similar concept, but of course a lot of this is so new that there's plenty of hybridization. There's plenty of things I've seen where people are incorporating kind of all of them into one system, and I don't know how they're ever going to get it to work. And then coupled versus decoupled on here is, I guess we'll talk another minute or two over, but coupled versus decoupled's already been mentioned several times, and a lot of people have great interest in decoupling their systems, and all that is a traditional RAS system right next to or pretty close to your traditional hydroponic system. So the RAS, we mentioned that ½ pound per gallon, or ½ pound of fish per gallon of water. That's really humping up the density so you can get the best of both worlds. We know with aquaponics it might be 7, 10, 12 gallons of water per 1 pound of fish, so a lot lower densities. And decoupling those systems, you can really hump up the densities like a traditional RAS, and then run your hydroponic system like a traditional hydroponic system, except you can just pump some water over, not little, especially if you're doing something like an NFT, but have it one way where pretty much water leaves there. Helps if you're trying to treat, if you need individual pHs. You know, everything is married together, your bacteria, your fish, and your plants. So if the pH, there's a small overlap, and Bill gave a great talk about the overlap between how much or what pH the fish prefer, what pH the plants prefer, what pH the bacteria prefer. Decoupling the systems allow you to adjust pHs kind of separate from each other. If you ever do have to treat your plants because they get some type of fungus or a parasite, you got to add something to your water. If it's one way and not going back to your fish, it can certainly protect you there. But you have greater options than if you were an actual coupled system, which is what Fresh Harvest Farms, in which most of the stuff that's actually run are all coupled systems. But this gives you an idea there. Well, how many slides I got? But of course, we see this. I only got a couple more. Most of y'all, you're here for a reason. You probably have already YouTubed 1,000 things over and already done some stuff yourself. But it's very basic concepts about how they work. You feed your fish, the fish excrete your waste. Your bacteria convert that waste over into something that's beneficial for the plants. Plants uptake those nutrients, and that clean water runs back to the fish. Pretty basic concepts. Most of your micro and macronutrients are supplied through the fish feed that you're adding. But of course, iron, calcium, potassium are going to be missing, at least in the necessary quantities that you need. So sometimes you'll have to supplement those over. And a lot of that will depend on your source well water. Your source water also depend on the type of plants. If you've got something like a red or green leaf lettuce that we have a lot back there of, those are a lot less nutrient demanding than some of your others. If you start getting a tomato or something that demands a lot more of a specific micro or macronutrient, you might find out that with red and green leaf lettuce, you're just fine because whatever source water you have is supplying enough nutrients in addition to the food, or in addition to the food that you're feeding your fish. But if you switch to another plant, you might find yourself a little nutrient deficient and have to go through and add chelated iron or potassium hydroxide or something like that to your system. So it's not just source water, but it's also plant specific as well. You've already seen this, but this was left in from another presentation, so I'll just run through it real quick. As I mentioned, how things work. Water's dumped in, water goes through there through our filters. That's where a lot of the bacteria breaks down a lot of those nutrients. Although there is the same bacteria that's present here is present through every single piece of this system. We don't confine it, it just grows where it wants to grow. But we allow a lot of the growth to occur here. So of course water runs down, back, down, back, down, back. and then stuff back to the system. You've already seen it, but it gives you another view. Of course, this is an old picture because we no longer have that third bed there anymore. I think this is my last slide. Just talk on it briefly because there is a little bit of interest here, especially in some of our neighboring states. I think we've got a few folks here interested, so I'll just talk on it briefly. Biofloc, very small water usage, so considering that RAS is at 7 to 15% of that water needs to be replaced each day. Usually less than 1% with your biofloc. Most of that water stays in-house and never ever leaves. So it's even more, I guess, water efficient than your typical RAS systems. But everything relies on microbial communities. It's tough to see here, but this water is super nasty and brown. It's that all those biofloc, those particulates that are in the water, those bacteria that are present here and everywhere else, every bit of that flock, whether it's uneaten feed or excreted waste, any type of bit that binds together, those same bacteria that are present here and everywhere else are developing on those flock particulates themselves. So they're the same bacteria that go through and nitrify and break that down from ammonia to nitrite to nitrate. Same bacteria is present there, and if you've got enough flock in here, they can develop in high enough quantities so that they can actually go through and do the same thing. You pretty much rely on saltwater shrimp and tilapia in these types of systems. The reason these two guys do very well is they'll actually turn around and eat some of that flock, so you can lower those FCRs, those feed conversion ratios. You can actually lower those lower than 1, be very, very efficient because they are turning around and eating a lot of that flock that's in the water, using that as their growth too. But you still got to control and measure your flock real easy. You dip a cone of water in there, see how long in a couple minutes, how much settles out, gives you an idea of how much, whatever per, I guess, micrometers per liter, however much is in that system, give you an idea if you need too much but not enough. But it is very heavily reliant on DO. Your dissolved oxygen goes out, you're up a creek without your paddle, and you're going to lose your fish or your shrimp pretty quickly. But that's just down in Kentucky State, where Dr. Ray does a lot of good stuff over there. A lot thrown at you, but that's why we record it. That's why we put it online. That's why we make you do homework. But it's kind of basic systems, principles. Hope I didn't take every bit of Dean's talk. I know we got to move on. I don't know how much of the other talk I took, but I guess if anybody's got a question, certainly answer it real quick. Yes, sir?
Could you marry a biofloc system with an aquaponics system?
Yes, you can. And I didn't say, well, it's being recorded, so whatever. But, Alan Patillo, my counterpart at Iowa State, has tried to coin the phrase bioflocoponics. That's what he's wanted to do. And that's the bandwagon he wants people to jump on, because he has a ton of people very interested in biofloc, a ton of people interested in aquaponics, and he definitely likes the aquaponics side, so he's trying the bioflocoponics stuff.
Alrighty, I guess we'll roll right on into the second part. My name is Brad Bergerford. I'm a horticulture specialist here at the OSU South Centers with everybody else, and I'm also the Scioto County Ag Agent. So if any of you are in Scioto County, you're my farmer clientele as well. I'm mainly a horticulture guy. I've been working with OSU Extension and OERDC, which is our research branch of the College of Ag at Ohio State, for 27 years. And my main research and education objectives have been just to come up with ways my farmers can make more money. And I'm always looking at new crops and new types of production techniques, either to save my farmers money or make them money. And I guess my interest in aquaponics, I don't know nothing about fish except I like to eat them. But other than that, Dr. Laura too used to be here back in 2013 with Extension. We have a small grants program that we can make proposals and we can come up with new projects that we might be interested in pursuing and getting some preliminary work on. So me and her applied for a grant through OSU Extension to look at aquaponics, because really nobody in Ohio has looked at aquaponics production. I've done hydroponics work, and Laura had done aquaculture work, but nobody had ever looked at the two systems. And I always wondered, I mean, as a horticulture guy working in these greenhouse crops, our main thing is nutrient water, using that nutrient-rich water solution or fertilizer solution for our plants. And I hear these fish farmers are all dumping this good stuff down the drain every so often. So when she approached me, and me and her worked together for many years, we thought it was a pretty good project to pursue, so we did. It wasn't big money, a couple $1,000 or something we got to design a system, but work with the good folks like Paul and Dean and the farmer engineers here. Wayne Lewis is our farm manager. Tom Harper is our horticulture assistant. We all just put our brains together and took a bunch of junk, really, that was sitting out along the fence row, old fish tanks. And I had done some, in this area of the state, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the largest specialty crop was tobacco. So I think if you grow tobacco, you're probably familiar with how the tobacco growers grow their plants. They grow them in a float bed technique, it's called, where you just use a spieling styrofoam tray, fill it with soilless mix, a real lightweight soilless mix, and then that's how they grow their tobacco plants. They float them on this bed of water, and 2 months later, they got their tobacco plants ready to go. So for years, I've worked with our tobacco growers trying to come up with other crops that can be produced, because basically it's almost a hydroponic type of a system. So we had worked on 20 years ago, back when we had research plots in Hillsboro, on looking at different crops. Some of the crops that Laura and I tested in our aquaponics system that you'll see out back here today were we tested 20 years ago in that float bed technique. So when she approached me, I said, yeah, I can do the hydroponics float bed technique. You take care of the fish, just make sure they're doing their job and give me enough nutrients so we can grow a crop. So that's how my experience got started. I learned a lot. Laura learned a lot. Our whole crew learned a lot. And, we have nowhere to go but now up. This thing could make us a lot of money. Some of our data, we were turning like a Mizuna, which is a specialty spinach that our produce growers or our produce buyers really like Jungle Jim's market down in Cincinnati. They buy a lot of Mizuna. It's an oriental type spinach. They pay about $5 a pound for that. It brings pretty good money. So our data, preliminary data that Laura and I got, we could turn 10 ounces of this per square foot in these grow beds in a 30 to 40 day period. 40, 45 days in the winter when we don't have much light, 28 to 30 days in the spring when we got lots of sunshine, the heat of the summer. So you turn that, say 10 times at $5 a pound, and we're doing 10 ounces per square foot, and one of those trays we'll show you a picture of, and that Matt showed you, is about 2 square foot. We can, in a standard 30 by 96 high tunnel or greenhouse, we can turn a gross return of about $60,000. But that, Christy Welch is going to talk to you here in April. She's our marketing specialist, so you know the $5 a pound has to be doing good marketing and so forth. But we can, that's the potential for an aquaponic system. Now we've learned a lot. Sometimes those fish just don't do their business enough in the water to keep my plants healthy. They don't get enough of the nutrition, and like Matt was pointing out, sometimes we can't treat our plants for pest or disease, or even I just used to spike in that water with some more nitrogen and giving those plants a boost and getting them back into gear. The fish don't do that as quick for me, and we learned that. We had some nitrogen deficiencies when the fish weren't quite doing their business and weren't ramping up the nitrate production. But I'm just going to go over some of the things that some of the farms that I've worked with that have done hydroponics, types of operations that can be adapted to aquaponics, and then just some of our experiences with aquaponics. Matt showed you these pictures, but this is from the very beginning stages where we got a couple $1,000 and we took everything we had laying along the fence row and set up a system. But you know, when you can produce this kind of a lettuce crop in 30 or 40 days with basically nothing, I mean, really, this is just, these are 2x6s lined with some black plastic. That's your standard tobacco float bed. That's what my tobacco farmers do. These are standard tobacco speedling trays. They're styrofoam trays. They do come in different cell sizes. And some of the research, preliminary research that Laura and I were looking at yields from the different cell sizes. We also looked at different types of soilless mixes. Basically, it come back to this tobacco mix. That's the one that did the best. We were looking at all this other stuff that was being used throughout the U.S., some of this pebble rocks and other stuff like that. But really, it came back to our best yields and our best production were with these soilless mixes, and we can produce a really beautiful crop. Now this one's looking a little peaked just because the fish weren't doing their business quite a bit enough for me, but we're learning. We can adjust that as we go, but there's a lot of potential there for a system like this, and you take this on a per square foot basis, you can make some really good money if you do everything right. Here's some of the yields we had. We had acceptable yields, really. Here's some of the different soilless mixes that we're looking at. Hydrocorn, we looked at on red leaf lettuce, we looked at Mizuna, we had some of this volcanic rock stuff. I don't know where Laura got that idea, but you can see those yields were way down, weren't they? The best one was our Mizuna Oriental spinach using the soilless tobacco mix, which is just a very light, fluffy mix, just enough to hold that, get that seed germinated, hold that plant up. Because when you go back here and look at these trays, the bottom of those trays, the roots all go out into the water. That's where they're pulling up the nutrients. We're not using the soilless mix to gain any nutrient content per se. There's not a whole lot there, but it does do the best job of keeping that seed moist, giving that plant good support system, and just providing a good base. The other ones, the rock and the hydrocorn, just the seeds couldn't germinate well, the plants were tipping over, it just wasn't a good mix. So this is very readily available. That soilless tobacco mix is readily available from any greenhouse supply store. We have a lot of those fruit and vegetable supply companies around these parts that you can get it from. So that's basically what we've went with now, but you can see in one turn of that tray, in about, I don't know what time of the year this was, but this was our average for the year. You take an average of 10 ounces per square foot, and one of those trays is about 2 square foot, and you can get about 850 of those trays. You got to count for the, you've seen the lane or the walkways that Matt had on the pictures there. You can take all those out. We're still talking 800-900 trays in a greenhouse, a simple 30 by 96 greenhouse, at 10 ounces per square foot times 10 turns in a year. There's where you can get the money. So that's why we kept looking at this, because we did see a profit potential here. Some of this is just going to reiterate. We'll go over what Matt already talked about, but we're basically doing the plants and the fish. If I had to do this as a horticulturist, I wouldn't do it, because I am not a fish guy at all. They're more finicky than my hops and my tomatoes and my melons and everything else. But if you're a good manager and you can learn those systems, or you have partners, say you have a good horticulturist in the family or in the farm and a good fish farmer, blend the two together, I think it's a really nice system. But me, I can just shoot them with a bunch of nitrogen. I don't need the fish to make me my nitrogen, but it does work very good. And I really like it that we do save that water, that we can utilize those resources that are coming out of that aquaculture operation. And it's just this reduction in wastewater. That's what I like about this. We don't need much land. I have a urban ag project in Dayton. The city of Dayton gave us $160,000 to look at all these vacant lots that they have in downtown Dayton. Well, some of those vacant lots have no soil left. There were no school or no factory. There's just no soil. We can't grow stuff in the ground. So what are we doing? We're putting up these greenhouses, putting up these tunnels. Not doing aquaculture yet, but we do have the hydroponics going in those downtown Dayton operations. So this kind of operation, the aquaponics, can be done on our vacant lots in Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, what have you. So it does have a lot of good ways that we could adopt this to other production areas rather than just the farm. There is a heck of a market. That's why we have $5 a pound lettuce for this specialty Mizuna and these specialty green and red leaf lettuces. There is a demand out there for this fresh lettuce, and it's not just summertime, it's year-round. And we have produced these lettuces and these specialty spinaches on a year-round basis. That's what's neat about it. We can do it, even in an unheated high tunnel. High tunnels are just a greenhouse with a piece of plastic over it. The ones you'll see out back here that we have, they got heaters and movers, and you hear all this stuff going on, these fans running. But you can do the same system in an unheated high tunnel. If you look out back as you're leaving the day, we have many high tunnels out there that we're looking at different crop scenarios. And we're just using the passive heating from the sun. Like yesterday, when the sun came out, it got warm in those high tunnels. We were pushing 80 degrees in some of the high tunnels I was in yesterday. And we also passive cool them. We just roll up the sides or crack the sides or crack the doors a little bit, and we use the natural ventilation and airflow to cool those. So no electricity, no heaters, but you could do the same type of system in a high tunnel. Basically, we have to go organic. Because of the fish in the closed loop system, we can't use really our traditional pesticides, fertilizers. We don't need herbicides, so we don't have to worry about that. But I think the fish people have told me it's tough to get a fish farm certified organic. Is that true, Bill? So, you know, we might be able to grow, I don't know if we can grow the produce within a aquaponic system and have it be organically certified, but there is that potential, and you'll have to explore that. If you're trying to market an organic product, you may have to see, okay, my fish can't be certified organic, but maybe I can certify my crop production as organic. So you have to explore that, but basically you are growing an organic product. So you can market that as, you know, pesticide-free. There's lots of ways that you can take this and market it as a good organic product. And the potential is there for year-round production. We'll see it out. You'll see it back here when you visit out back to our trials today. But there is a round-the-year markets. Downtown Dayton, going back to my Dayton project again, there's a couple farmers markets that are running on a year-round basis. They love to have that fresh-grown lettuce in there right now. Some of the disadvantages that we've learned could be high startup costs. I guess that could be a question mark, though. Back when Laura and I started this, it was a pretty high startup cost. But with our farmer engineers we have here on staff, and you can just do a farmer engineering thing, you can see we turn some good production with very little upfront investment. So it can be done on a somewhat lower cost scale. We lack the research in Ohio. We do, at least we got what we got. But we do need to do a lot more, and we are exploring new funding opportunities to keep fine-tuning this aquaponics production. And like I said earlier, you have to manage both systems. It's tough enough to be a specialty lettuce or specialty crop grower. It's tough enough to be an aquaculture producer. When you put the two together, hopefully you like the hard work, and you like to manage, and you like to babysit 24/7, because with this type of a system, you almost have to be managing that on a 24/7 basis. It just takes constant monitoring. I mean, the water can be messed up real fast. I'll show you some pictures of one of my farmers that have some major issues with water. Been doing the same lettuce production for years. Last year, everything went haywire, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Very little energy inputs, really. I mean, we could really just do this float bed technique in a high tunnel, be totally off the grid. No electric, no heaters, no lights. Really don't need many pumps except to fill your float beds every once in a while. Very small energy inputs compared to like a big hydroponic operation. We have a 350-acre hydroponic tomato operation up in northwest Ohio. You walk into there, it is major energy dependent. Lights running and pumps running all the time. We can do it pretty cheaper with low energy inputs with this type of system we're exploring. And then, like Christy will talk to you about here in April, the marketing is the key. You can do it on a wholesale basis. I have lots of wholesale buyers, produce buyers that'll buy wholesale lettuce. So you take that $5 a pound, basically divided two. So the wholesalers will give you $2.50 to $3 a pound if they're buying wholesale. So maybe that's another marketing niche. And at these types of yields, the profit potential is there, even if you enter a wholesale type of a market. I'm not going to go into this either. Matt did a good job just explaining how the aquaponics process works. This is the nitrogen cycle. I think I missed it, but he may have went over this as well. But we're just taking that fish water, and we're just converting it into the nitrate that's available to the plants, and just in a closed loop system. So we're really dependent on those fish to do their business in that fish water to give my plants the nitrate they need to produce a good crop. But nutrient management is important. This was the biggest downfall me as a horticulturist I've had with aquaponics, just because I've lost control of being able to, if there was a deficiency, I've lost control on being able to give that shot of nitrogen to that lettuce crop to get it back up. You know, I've seen these plants go and peaking for a week to 10 days there, and I just knew we were losing yield, and we were losing production time just because that slows down the plant's growth. Or we could have it reversed. Say we're using the nitrogen from the water for my tomatoes. Tomato crop is sort of like, has anybody grown tomatoes in the garden? We get these calls at the county office all the time. Biggest, beautiful tomato plant, but no tomatoes. Well, a tomato crop or a pepper crop, if the nitrogen is there too heavy at that juvenile stage of that plant's growth, it's sort of like my grandsons. When they come over to visit, I have a bowl of candy laid on the table, and my grandsons will just keep eating and eating and eating that candy. Same thing as those tomato and pepper crops. If we give them too much nitrogen up front, they're just going to keep eating and eating and eating, and then they just remain vegetative, and they get so tall. He said there's no reason to reproduce because life's good. I'm not starving. I can live just fine. Then come the low light levels of the fall, and that plant says, oh my gosh, I need to reproduce, and then you'll get some late blooms. It doesn't work. So there's another issue we could have. We had too high nitrate levels, and we're growing a lettuce crop. Lettuce crop can actually, too much nitrate in a lettuce crop can also hurt the shelf life and taste. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with that, but on tomatoes or peppers, that plant can remain too vegetative, never does go into the reproductive stage of growth, never does produce a crop, then we're hurting that way too. So with aquaponics, we sort of lose control of monitoring that nutrient program. Another thing is succession cropping. Once we get into this, we may be growing 2 crops together at the exact same time. We're currently doing this. We got tomatoes planted in the ground right now. My farmers do. They started planting about 3-4 weeks ago. But to make some more money, they intercrop that tomato planting at this early stage with a lettuce crop. The lettuce is going to grow better under these low light levels, under these cooler temperatures, and this tomato plant isn't canopying over yet. There's still plenty of sunlight to get down into this understory. So then what do? What if we merge succession or intercropping with aquaponics, and we're trying to manage 2 different nitrogen amounts? We don't want much here because this plant will remain vegetative. We want a bunch right here because this is a quick crop. So there's a lot of research that needs to be done in this area yet, and that's called intercropping. But with our specialty crops, we regularly fertilize them. That's what's neat with this system. We're getting a constant flow of fertility coming into those crops. Fertigate or fertilize often. We do have to adjust it throughout the season, and I forgot to grab it, but we do use in the specialty crop arena, just like you all fish farmers monitor your water for all the chemical properties of that water, we do the same thing on our specialty crops. We use a tool called a cardiometer, and after I'm done I can get that and you guys can look at it at the break. But the cardiometer, we take weekly petio sap analysis samples of all crops. It could be tomatoes, it could be melons, it could be hops, it could be lettuce, you name it. But we collect weekly petio sap analysis, and we're using this cardiometer, and we get instant nitrate readings. So I can tell, before my crops show a deficiency, I can tell whether I have too much nitrate in that plant or not enough, and I can adjust it. That's what makes aquaponics a little tough, because if I am short, how do I add more real quick, so maybe kick up the fish feeding? Or if I'm running too high, how do I cut it back, because my fish are still needing to eat and needing to do their business. So it's a little tougher to adjust, but we can do it, and the best thing to monitor that with is the use of these cardiometers. You can send petio sap analysis tests off to any soil testing lab. We use Spectrum Analytic up in Washington Courthouse because they're close, and Tom Harper lives right close to them, so my helper does. He just drops those samples off, and we can get a lab analysis. But when we use a lab, we got some lag time there. By the time we drive them up, they run the samples, we get the numbers back. We could be looking at 2 days. With a cardiometer, I get a quick test. I can go ahead and adjust my fertility levels really fast. But we use these protective structures to grow these crops year round. That's the tunnels or the greenhouse I'm talking about, but you can do it outside. If you don't want to grow in the winter months, you can do the same float bed technique, and I'd like to look at it someday where I can find it funny, but we have these outside fish tanks. We could build these exact same float beds outside. A lot of my tobacco growers grow their plants outside because they're growing in the seasons when we don't have a frost or cold. It starts in April and they're done during the warm months. So we haven't done it, but I do think those aquaponics could actually be moved to an outside production area, so you don't have to mess with having a greenhouse and a high tunnel and all that, and you just do seasonal production outside. So stay tuned. We got a lot of neat ways that we could do this. But by managing this fertilizer, all these specialty crops, we can minimize the environmental impacts of releasing that fish water out to wherever you release it to, and we can use it for our crops. This is a picture of the cardiometer, and I'll bring one here and let you all take a look at it today. It's changed a little bit. This is one I bought 20 years ago, and I'm still using it. It's just a little handheld reader that has a little sensor under this flap. You take a garlic press, you remove the most fully mature leaf petioles, not the leaf tissue. You got to cut the leaf tissue out, but the petio where it secures itself to the plant. We chop that petio up, put it inside the garlic press, and then we squeeze that plant sap onto the meter. This is called a cardi pen, basically the same thing. It just changed over the last 20 years. But once we squeeze that plant sap on there, we get an instant nitrate reading. So then as a crop producer, we can adjust that feeding program. We don't want to see a deficiency. You see yellow tomato plants or yellow cucumbers or yellow peppers, or your lettuce is turning peaked, you've already hurt yourself. You've already cut your yield, you've cut your crop time, you're losing money. This kind of a tracking device or monitoring device can actually make us money. They run about $495 today. I think I bought this one 20 years ago for like $150 or something. So they went up in price, but when you send one sample off to the lab and it's $20, and you do that on a weekly basis at a minimum, you can actually pay for one of these in 1 year's term growing a produce crop. This is what we don't want to see. This is a strawberry, and you'll see some of this out back there. We're testing a new tower system on strawberries, which can be easily adopted to aquaponics. We're just going to divert the nitrogen water source through a different type of an injection system. But we're seeing some of this, and we're hurting ourselves, but we're learning. If you look at my tower system back there, my bottom plants are showing some nitrogen deficiency. They've only been in the ground about 5 weeks, but that's the trouble with towers. You water from the top, it makes its way to the bottom, and by the time it makes its way all the way through that column, you could have less nitrogen at the bottom than you do at the top. And we knew this was going to be an issue going into it. So you'll see some of this. We just need to make the adjustments. We're learning, but I've already hurt yield. I've already hurt that plant's growth, but that's why we do what we do. This is another thing. You'd hate to grow your tomatoes, get them to this point, and then unmarketable. A good example, this is called yellow shoulder disorder. It's a physiological fruit disorder of tomatoes, and it's because of the nitrogen to potassium ratio is messed up. They have to, at different stages of the plant's growth, you got to have that nitrogen to potassium ratio all in sync, depending on environmental conditions, stage of development, all that. I had one grower, actually two brothers, 30 acres of staked tomatoes, and their sister runs like 15 farm markets between Columbus and throughout southern Ohio. The brothers started selling her tomatoes like this. She didn't buy a single tomato out of 30 acres from her brothers because they screwed up on their fertility program. Their nitrogen and potassium ratios were all messed up. And this tomato, the whole top third is no good. Real hard, corky tissue, plus it don't look very good. So she refused to buy from her own brothers 30 acres of tomatoes. Needless to say, it was a very expensive lesson because not only did she have to buy tomatoes, but then they weren't able to sell the tomatoes they were growing on their own family farm to their own markets. They got a hold of me. I told them how to figure it out. I got them on a constant monitoring program twice a week using a cardi meter, and they also back it up with lab tests. Once they started doing that, they've never had an issue again. Grow some of the most beautiful tomatoes. But this can happen real easy in an aquaponics type of a system. And once you see this, we don't want this. We're already hurting our yields because you can't sell those types of tomatoes. Matt did a good job laying out all the different systems. What's neat with this system, we can grow them on top of each other. Lettuce is a low light crop. You don't need to have a full light intensity. Now, tomatoes wouldn't work in a system like this, but for lettuce, spinach, some of the low light crops, we could stack them on top of each other. We're stacking these strawberries, which I think is going to be an issue. We're going to have some shading effects, but I got to look and see, all right, if my bottom ones or the inside plants maybe don't produce as much, if I look at the whole greenhouse, am I making money? So that's what we're looking at. But you can have all kinds of issues with that too. But there's a floating raft system similar to what we got out back there. Continuous flow, multi-level, vertically integrated system, ebb and flow, troughs, gravel beds, all different types of farmer engineered ways. And everyone's going to have the different setup for their own different farm. It's endless what we can do with this system. Here's what you'll see out back. This was actually my float bed days. This wasn't from aquaponics. These were some research we did 20 years ago. And there you can see beautiful root system on there. That's a very healthy crop. You're going to produce a very high, quick 40-day lettuce yield out of that one. This is one of my farmers, Furman Orchards down in Salem County. They've been growing hydroponic tomatoes and this channel lettuce for probably 20, 25 years now. These were some old bedding plant houses that his mom used to have flowers in. They converted them over about 20 years ago to vegetable crops. Have done a very good job for many, many years. Made lots of money, except, I'll show you a little bit, except for last year. This is just another one of my farmers growing tomatoes in a pot system where they grow them inside these grow cubes, and they do a little cube, and then they put the little cube into a bigger cube, then they put the bigger cube into these pots, and then they're just fertigating on a constant basis, constant feed. So with this same thing, these are heat tubes underneath here to warm up that root system. But again, we can just use that same nutrient solution coming out of them fish tanks and just inject it right into these irrigation, fertigation tubes and do the same exact thing. So lots of money to be made here. We've done for many years, I think we started 15, 16 years ago, looking at this bag culture of cucumbers. And this was back in our greenhouse. You'll see another cucumber. This is from a long time ago. But we have another cucumber trial with another PhD student going on in there now. But OERDC, our research arm at Worcester, came up with this bag culture system. I think it was Alan Erd was the professor that did that. I think he did that almost 30, 35 years ago. So you can just feel it. It looks like a garbage bag. It's really not. It's a little heavier gauge, but this has soilless media, and then each bag has a drip emitter where we fertigate that crop. This is a new one we're looking at. This is not my work. I hope it looks like this. This is from Dr. Fumi Takeda with our USDA. He's the horticulturist with USDA in Kearneysville, West Virginia. And he did some work on these gutter production and lots of different production techniques in the off-season on strawberries back in the 90s. So I'm good friends with Fumi. I've been picking his brain a little bit and trying to see if we can, he don't do this research no more, but we're trying to take some of his old research and see if we can adopt it. So you'll see some of the new production techniques we're looking at back there in the greenhouse. But again, just utilizing that nutrient solution from the fish production into these types of different productions. This is for strawberries. With strawberries, off-season production, there's always a year-round market. We got like 500 acres in the state. The consumers, what the consumers are eating in Ohio alone would take 6,000 acres. So we have a lot of catch-up to do. I just hate that we're sending all that money. Our consumers are buying these strawberries from all these out-of-state producers when we could be doing it right here in Ohio. So that's what we're looking at, trying to extend the production season of strawberries. This is some of our pots, some of our work: arugula, bok choy, basil, mustard greens that we were looking at. And again, just this was a little thick. We've learned we didn't think we'd get this good of germination on some of these, so we had to prick these out and fit them back a little bit. But you can basically, what Matt and I have said, we can grow just about anything in an aquaponics system. But things can go bad real fast. This is Furman Orchards last year. Paul's been so good at this production system, so good for years, and then he's doing 100 acres of orchard, and he's doing tomatoes and doing everything else too, that he wasn't quite paying attention. And here we're getting into 60 days. He should have been harvesting this lettuce crop. This is about 60 days. No growth, is there, huh? Well, this same thing can happen in an aquaponics system. He's using the city water. Remember Matt showed the picture of all the different water sources we can use, and maybe you can use municipal water? The municipality, the water treatment plant that he was getting his water from, changed the filtration system somehow. He was not monitoring that water. The alkalinity levels just spiked way. I mean, they were pushing 9 on the alkalinity levels, not to mention soluble salt levels were going out the roof. Those poor little plants were trying to shoot their roots out into that nutrient solution. As soon as they hit it, they went back in because it was so high in salt that the roots would never come out of that grow cube. Hurt him bad. I mean, he lost 2 turns of this house just because that crop got slowed down. So this same thing, I mean, these should have been harvested. This red leaf lettuce should have been harvested, but because of that water problem. So that's where things can go bad real fast. If he would have been monitoring, he was busy pruning and spraying and everything else, but if he would have been monitoring that water, he could have monitored that and seen, oh my gosh, my salt levels are out the roof, my alkalinity is out the roof. We ended up changing things around. Once he told me about it, we looked at the test levels, I got him on a program, the season was fine then. But he lost a lot of money right here just because that water went bad. here's our system. You'll see out back, this is just a tower system for strawberries. And again, when you take a look at my strawberries, if you go into that house, these bottom ones are the ones having the nitrogen deficiency right now. Not real bad, but they're just starting. And the trouble is we have not been, I don't practice what I preach, I guess. We have not been doing weekly petio sap analysis of these, and we probably should have been, but they were so immature we didn't think we'd have issues yet, but we are. We're starting to see some nitrogen deficiencies on these bottom plants, so we'll get that corrected here this week because I can inject nitrogen here. If this is an aquaponics system, we'd have to do some fish management, wouldn't we, to go ahead and get some more nitrate going into these strawberries. So in summary, this aquaponics thing is more popular than ever. The local demand, market demand, the high prices, urban agriculture. I mean, it's great right now that this can fit into all the opportunities that we have. Great that you're here. Get training. Believe me, I've learned a lot. We do the mistakes for you, you don't have to. If you guys go home and try this, you'll make the mistake that costs you and your family money. That's why we're here. We're doing this research. We can learn, and we can hopefully ward off some damages to your own operation for you don't lose so much money. So get your training. Start small. I have one farmer. I don't know how he's going to do it. Just put up 3 50 by 250 greenhouses this winter. And he's going to grow all tomatoes and he never grew a tomato in his life. I'm really, really concerned. So I've been hand-holding him, not aquaponically. But again, just one example. I think he's getting into this a little too big. But start out small, get your training, learn. It's cheaper to learn on a small scale rather than a big scale. Avoid the shysters. You can jump on the internet and you can find all these aquaponics setups, and everybody will be happy to take your 20, 30, 40,000 bucks. I don't think you really need it. I think we can use a lot of the farmer-engineered type techniques that we've been doing in the especially ground arena for years. I think you can almost use those and modify them a little bit for aquaponics. Do careful business planning. I think you're going to have several of our business team folks talking to you about business planning. Plan it out. Don't grow the lettuce and the tomatoes and then try to find a market for it. Go talk to the Jungle Gyms. Talk to the San Filippo Produce. Talk to the markets before you get a crop, because that's going to set up your business plan, how much potential price you can get, how much potential production they're going to buy. Have that all worked out in advance. I've seen too many folks plant a produce crop and then not have a home for it. And if you go in with a truckload of tomatoes and you try to sell it then, those produce buyers love you because they're going to knock the price down. It could be a $5 or a $3 a pound tomato. You're sitting there begging them to take it, it'll be down to 50 cents. They literally will do that. They know. Like I said, start out small, be ready to market, make sure you have your marketing plan put together, and then just keep connected with research people like us. There's a lot of good folks at aquaponics school that's coming up out there. Just keep in touch with all those folks to stay up to date on what's going on, and we can all learn together. All of our research results, I don't know if Matt told you, both aquaculture and horticulture, on our website, southcenters.osu.edu. Just click on whatever program area you want. I've got on horticulture over 20 years of research results on our website. So if you want to be on my if you're interested in horticulture, we have a horticulture listserv that we just send out when we're having schools and workshops. You can email me and we'll get you added to that. We'll send you the link that you can add to that. If you're interested in hops, a lot of people are interested in hops. We've been doing hops research now going on 4 years. We have a hops listserv, so you can subscribe to that too. So with that, I think we've about burnt 30 minutes. Any questions? I'm going to stick around. I got to meet with a fertilizer company up on campus today. They want to talk to me about doing some hops research on a fertility program. But any questions on the plant side of aquaponics?
The strawberries you had, were those hydroponically grown?
Both, actually. The ones in the gutters were that nutrient film technique where the water was just flowing through, similar to the lettuce gutters. And then the ones on the ground actually had some soilless mix in those bags. So hydroponics, there's a big definition. We're basically just using the soil or any type of media as a support base for that plant. Really, hydroponically, we are feeding everything. Even my strawberries back here, we're feeding them all through a nutrient solution. We're just using that soil to hold that plant in place. So yeah, hydroponically, I'd say everything was on the big picture hydroponically because we're feeding everything. Yeah, back there.
Hey Brad, have you guys ever done anything with salt water?
Salt water?
Yeah, saltwater aquaponics.
except I hate salt water. This place here has some of the worst high soluble salt waters that I've ever come across. If you look at some of our irrigation systems and our pads back here, our cooling pads, it just eats the heck out of them. So I hate salt water, but no, I want to get rid of it. I don't, but I do know some other universities and some other countries and so forth have done some saltwater research. I've been to Israel, and I've went over there and worked with researchers on fruit and vegetable production in Israel, and they are doing saltwater type of production because they have high soluble salts in the Negev desert. I don't want to do that. I think we have good water. I don't think we really need to worry about that here in Ohio, but it's an issue for me because we've lost a lot back here because of the high soluble salts in our water. So no, short answer is I don't want to do anything with salt. I would get rid of it.
Could you, those floating pots and stuff, would there be enough nitrates in the pond to let them float the pond?
In the
fish and
pond.
everything?
Question was, if we floated these trays on a pond, would there be enough nutrients in the pond water to feed the crop? And I haven't done the research, but I had a farmer do this 20 years ago, Jeff Patton up in Marshall, up in Highland County, and he thought he'd do the same thing. He was a big greenhouse guy, but he had this pond outside next to the greenhouse, and he go, why can't I just float trays and grow plants and lettuce and stuff? They didn't do worth a darn. I don't think the nutrient concentrations are high enough in that pond water to, we have a hard enough time in aquaponics. You take a great big body of water like a pond, I just don't think you can get the nutrient levels up enough to grow them on a pond. And that was a good example. There was no research on it, but he never did it again. He tried it once and they looked so peaked and so bad. So, plus you have them trays, you'd be chasing them around the pond as they float. They're like little boats. They'd be going all over.
The real problem you got there is you got competition with the normal plants that are in the pond, phytoplankton and submerged plants and stuff. They're taking it up as fast as they can take it up.
Because I'm not a fish farmer, but wouldn't these fish love to just eat on those nice white roots that are sticking out
There
the
are some
bottom of
fish
the
that
roof?
will.
Yeah, so I think it'd just be an issue. One more?
What variety of strawberries do you use?
Well, the strawberries, we're testing June bears as well as day neutrals back here. Day neutrals are the ones that produce under short and long day light levels. The June bears just do short day. Those are the ones we're done with by early July into June. They just produce during June. We're looking at them both, but I don't think the June bears are going to do very well for us. We're shooting to harvest these. You'll see a few fruits set. We've been pinching blooms until last week. We'll be harvesting here in about 20 days. And we're also looking at harvesting these into the fall, in the short days. So if we're going to harvest under short day conditions, we're going to have to go with a day neutral. And the ones we're looking at are Seascape, Albion, and San Andreas. Those day neutrals have done the best for us in the field. I have farmers that are double cropping those day neutrals. They plant them in the fall, harvest them in May, and harvest them up until about the second week of June. That's when they're done with their spring crop. Then we go in and we hand remove 2/3 of the plant, remove all the spent blooms, remove the runners by hand, hit them with some nitrogen real fast. 3 weeks later, they're blooming all over again. They'll bloom all the way up to Christmas if the weather's right. So those day neutrals we can actually double crop. And the ones that have been successfully double crop are Albion, San Andreas, and Seascape. We did Seascape back. These other two, San Andreas and Albion, are new varieties. Seascape we did here 15 years ago. We were looking at Seascape and did the best. So,
Do you know what you had up there with the gutters? Was that day neutral or what's the gutter?
Fumi's work, those were Fumi's slides, and those were day neutral producers. He was growing them in the winter months. Yeah.
What levels of nitrates are you going to be able to see out of these RAS systems? And does that bring up the level where you want to see hydroponics?
Yeah, you know nitrate levels that are in an RAS? What levels of nitrate will we be seeing in an RAS system?
You get a couple hundred, no problem.
And that's about what we're looking at. As a horticulture guy, I'm looking at 100 parts per million. Depending on the stage that a crop grows, a tomato plant's only going to need about 40 to 50 early. But then as we get into fruiting, we'll be looking at close to 150, 200. So there's charts. As a horticulturalist, I can give you a chart that gives you the recommended parts per million you need to be. When we do these cardiometer tests, I'll look at the chart. what stage of development is that crop at, and am I in that sufficiency or deficiency range? So there are charts available, and I could, if y'all need those, just email me, or I can get Matt a copy of them. You guys can have those. But they're it's in the notes handbook. It's the Vegetable Growers Bible, and those charts are all listed in the notes. It's from George Hockmuth's work down at the University of Florida, but it's relevant wherever that crop's being grown. I think I went a little bit over. I don't know.
Just a quick one. When you were doing like the aquaponics test fields with the different mediums, do you know why like the soilless mix was so much higher than say like the hydrocorn?
We didn't have a lot of money to really look at those, why we had those. As you can see, they were statistically significantly different between the different treatments. I knew from the start though, that hydrocorn, you stick a seed on there and some of this, it falls through, it went down into the water. I didn't know, I think there were issues there. The soilless mix does have a little bit of charge in it. So whether that little bit of charge was enough to get that little seedling off to a quicker start where the other treatments had no charge, but we didn't have the money to really explore that. We just found out we're not using that hydrocorn again or any of that other stuff because the seed would go right through it. I think it might work if you transplanted, sort of weasel that plant down in there and let the roots go. I think it would hold it in place. I think it just did not work for me as a horticulturist.
Yeah, and so germinating in it isn't going to work. So
No.
I tried germinating separate, putting it in there. It's
That
working.
might work.
I just started that.
Okay.
So that
Let us know how
seems
it
to be
works. That
working.
might work. Yeah.
All right, good morning, everyone. So, everything working? Here we go. Normally, I'm playing with my cat or Dean with the laser pointer. So, if you don't know me, my name is Paul O'Brien, and we're going to talk a little bit today of get back into fish and get Brad out with the plants. But this was a talk that was actually, we did it in October, so if anyone was at the intro to aquaculture, it's about the same talk. There's not a whole lot that's changed from October into February, and even from years past. We'll go over just getting started, the introductory, and what species can I raise. I'm not going to stand up there and tell you like this is the one species you need to raise, but we'll really go through just a lot of the, I'll say historically, some of the common species choices you have in Ohio. I thought about titling this slide "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly" because with every species there's good, there's bad, and there's some stuff you just don't want to deal with. So we'll try to run through some of those, and like I said, hopefully you'll be able to take out some bits of information that I didn't know that, or you can use when you make your choice, or if you've already made your choice, maybe something else that actually can help you. The first thing I always, like I said, like to mention about, we've talked about this, I think, in other meetings, is make sure you have all your permits. Like I said, I won't go into a lot of detail, but just Class A species. These are some of the species that's listed in the, I guess, in the fine print right there. That's just that list, and that's not all the Class A species. That's just some of the common ones that they give you just a nice, you can check off. And this is on the, I think, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Wildlife website, and like they bury it there. You have to find it. So really, the best way to do is just search for that. In addition to that, like I said, there's a publication 5061, if anyone loves to read publications and fact sheets. Again, that's on the Department of Natural Division of Wildlife website. And that goes over all the Class A, all the Class B species. There's unclassified species. Now, one example of that would be lake sturgeon. You have to have a letter from the chief to even have those. They don't hand those out. There has to be some justification. So not really an aquaculture species, but it's still listed as an unclassified species. And they're also just prohibited species. You're not allowed to have these. You're not allowed to do anything with them. And the prohibited's probably not going to change. There's a reason they're on that list. And again, there's some species that's not, I'll say that's not on, it's so strange or it's never been thought of before that they're not on any list. And if you really wanted to raise them, if there's some reason, you can go through a process and justify that they're not going to get out and wreck the ecosystem, then there's a process that actually can do that. One example of that was freshwater shrimp. I think it's been 15 years ago, so it's when they actually went through the process. But we'll just start off again, like I said, just with the good, the bad, the ugly of everything. Yellow perch, it's very common in Ohio. We get a lot of, I guess, a lot of people that's interested in it. grows, like I said, just pond cages, just RAS systems, aquaponics. It does really well. It's like it's suited for the climate. Like I said, just you can sell it all stages if you're raising it from egg. Like I said, fingerlings, pond stalkers, food. Last couple of years, we've always seemed to get calls about people wanting fingerling yellow perch, or even yearling yellow perch. Just for most of it's going. It seems to be they want pond stalkers. Have a couple of hatcheries call us and want us to know if we have any leftovers or anything that they can sell. There always seems to be a demand. I'll say the last couple of years for yellow perch. For a market size for a food fish, it takes about 18 months to get that market size, and that is in pond culture. Like I said, there's a high demand for that. But then also one of the things is that the farther north you get, you start competing with the catch-off Lake Erie. One of those things that so you have to market your product as this is better than the Lake Erie catch. Now that goes back to marketing. That's the one thing I think I'll stress more than anything. As we go through this talk, I said you can raise anything. I said, but then the marketing is, can I make money at it? Can I actually sell this product that actually to make a profit at it? Or maybe if you just want it for your own personal consumption, then your choice is already made. Again, like I said, there's some of the gaps in the production. That's some of the, I'll say, we talk about the good, like I said, the time and just, there is a demand for it. But then some of the bad was there is gaps in production. Perch spawn usually once a year. They put out a ribbon-like structure. And that's always happens in the spring. So if you raise your fish up, you sell them, and then you're looking for more to stock back in your system, your pond, whatever that may be, then they're not available. Or they're available at a much higher cost. Like I said, we were working with one of our genetic selection program here, and then just to try to get them a little bit larger, because that is another problem in a pond harvest or a tank harvest. You always have about, I'll say 60% of them, 60 to 70 make market size. Well, you're left with 30 to 40% that didn't make market size. So, all right, what do you do with those? Do they become pond stalkers? What we've seen is even if you hold them back and feed them more, it's still they've grown slower for a reason. So it does take time to, if you're trying to grow for a food fish. So it takes time to get them there, and sometimes the inputs are not worth the extra time that you've used to reach market size. And again, like I said, this is the sexual dimorphism. The females grow up, like I said, larger than the males. So again, from a food fish perspective, if you're trying just strictly for that market, a lot of the males are not going to make, some of them not going to make that cut like I said, from a food fish perspective. So you have to figure out something to do with again, and that goes back to marketing. And again, like there has been some work with year-round spawning to try to get that, a better, I say, cycle of production. And it seems to be that you can kind of, I'll say, trick them with light and temperature, but that first spring spawn is always the best. And then, like I said, the success goes down from there. The bluegill hybrids, that's actually, like I said, there's starting to be more of a demand for that. I think we're all familiar, people, like I said, are familiar with that. Most of them, if you go fishing, that's the first fish you catch is a bluegill. Again, they do well. Like I said, ponds, cages, RS, aquaponics. Like I said, again, it's just a natural fish. Again, like I said, it's sold as just pond stalkers, food fish, or some even here is that bait fish. And there is some other regulations with that. But we all, I think, remember just, again, the first fillet as you fried them up. But again, some of the bad with that is they have a low dress out ratio, about 30% dress out when you fillet them out. And the males, like I said, it's reversed now in bluegill. The males get a lot bigger, so you have these little females that you need to figure out what are you going to do with it. How am I going to get rid of this small bluegill? And then it takes a little bit longer to get that market size. Some of the, like I said, processors, I think reading one of the 3/4 pound bluegill. That's a pretty good sized bluegill to get to a point that you have a whole population of. And just the nutrition, we've found even, some of the feeds of this commercial feeds you buy is not set up for like I said, just they're producing a lot of fat, and like I said, they're not producing it in the muscle, so you have to be careful just feeding them anything, because you don't want to waste your money on feed to find out it's just going in the fat and not the fillet. The freshwater prawn, like I said, the shrimp, I know I've talked to a few of you about that. This is the one, like I've always said, if I actually had water on the acres that I own, I would put a pond, and actually I've raised freshwater shrimp. Like I said, it's a short growing season, and then with marketing, with good marketing, like I said, you market it. It's always sold as a food. I won't say food fish, but it's always sold as a food. And the hotter the summer is, the better they seem to like it. Variable yields is one of the bad things we've noticed with that. We try to always have, say 1,000 pounds per acre is what the production, like I said, we'd like to see, but sometimes that varies for other reasons. Could be operator error, could be they're somewhat cannibalistic. So, and again, one of the things, if you're the nervous type, once you put them in, you generally don't see them the rest of the summer. You go out there and feed, and that's really one of the things. Are you feeding them enough? Are you feeding them too little? You can do some samples. We've thrown some nets and pulled some seines, but with shrimp, they like to dart out. And so it's hard to actually get a good, this is what's in my pond, out of a sample. But like I said, they're just another interesting, like I said, with that marketing, you can market them as a locally grown shrimp, and it's again, they're grown in ponds. They don't really do well in tanks at all. There's been some research at, like I said, Hocking College, and even here, if you put in 50 shrimp, you'll wind up with one big one. And we've grown dandy one shrimp, but like I said, that's not good for making money. Trout, like I said, historically has been in raceways. They require a lot of cold water. If anyone has a spring, that may be an option. There's some some work with, I guess, recirculating aquaculture systems. Just keeping that water clean, at a cooler temperature. And then that market size is from half a pound to a pound and a half. Again, I keep stressing that it all dictates marketing. If you can grow hundreds of thousands of pounds of fish, if you can't get rid of it or don't know where to get rid of it, and then that's always a problem. And that should be decided before you ever put fish in the tank. That's the one thing. Just like, where do I get rid of my fish? That's again the most important. Like I said, from an aspect for me, I can grow the fish. Like I said, but to actually sell them, that's the one thing I don't have a lot of experience on. So I think that's the most important thing. Largemouth bass, like I said, do well in ponds. Like I said, they do well in tanks. I said, really popular with the Asian market. Popular sold live. Like I said, I think that's again the jungle gyms, and down there they got them crammed in the tank for sale. But it's really, like I said, it takes a long time to actually get them to a grow out in a system. But there's also, if you think marketing, pay lake, like another one would be possible pay lake market. They do need to be graded. Bass eat other fish. That's what they like to eat. We've found that even just in small densities over in our hatchery. Like I said, we'll have 20 or 30 in the tank. We look in the tank the next day, there may be 25. The next day, 20. And then we realize we start to see one nice big fat one in there. So that's one thing. You always have to make sure that they're all about the same size so they can't eat each other. And then to that point, you don't want a lot of, like I said, mixed groups in there. Tilapia, I think most everyone is very popular as an aquaponics fish. We had just a side story, I guess. We had a doctor come over from Egypt, and he praised just how great tilapia was. He called it the miracle fish. He was doing the research on it. He even said, like, if you're a good Bible story, when Jesus fed the 5,000, it was with tilapia. I don't know where he got his research from that, but he called it the miracle fish, how great it was. It is a very hardy fish. It's very good for, like I said, beginning systems. It's like, another story was, we had a tilapia jump out, and I laid there for I don't know how long. Jordan thought it was dead. She said, what do I do with it? I said, throw it back in the tank. So as you threw it back in the tank and it swam away. So I always say they could jump out and lay there for days, but that's not really the case. You know, they're a warm water fish. They won't grow, like I said, through our winters. Like I said, but a lot of people use them in ponds for algae control. That's a way. That's another market that you can sell for ponds for algae control. And then the best thing for you if you're raising them is they die in the winter, so they have to come back in the spring and get more. So from a market size, it's a pound and a quarter to 2 pounds. And then like this, they're very hardy fish. They're sold live a lot of times. But then a couple of I'll say the negatives, the bad, and the ugly with that is from a fillet standpoint, they only have about I think a 30% dress out. Now with a head on and gut, it's about 86%. But then also the big one is if you've ever been to the store and looked at the fish and you bought it to compete with that, I'll say the imported Asian market, tilapia is dirt cheap. So you have to, again, it goes back to marketing, market your product that it's better than it's better from any of the market that you can go to the store and buy. And again, it always just goes back to marketing. The koi, the ornamentals, here's an insider tip I just got from Bill Lynch. There's a very high demand right now for that, for the pond stocking companies. And just they really like them. Like I said, just for again, selling for the backyard market. And just even the sizes, I said the market size, 1 to 6, koi is 3 to 12. That can go bigger or little. Again, it's all, what's your market, where do you want to sell these fish? And a high value if you understand the market. There's a whole science behind that. What 2 fish will make this koi will have this bright red color, this white marking where it needs to be. And again, that's a completely different, you can study that, try to come up with that through breeding. There was a grower that really was really involved with that. Like to, I guess I'll say, tell how much he spent on the koi. It was in the thousands of dollars. I don't know if he was just telling me that or it's actually, but there's high value if you understand those markets and in the right place. The bait fish, I think we're all familiar. Like I said again with how to grow them, just for ponds, tanks. They're sold for the sport fishermen entertainment. Down here, it's pay lakes because and then as we farther north, it gets into the lake, and then you also have to be careful with the regulations of crossing the VHS line. But it's a product that's sold live. And just some of the things you can grow is the shiner spot fins, the crayfish. Here it's like the bigger fish. Again, for the pay lakes, the bigger the bait, the bigger the fish. I guess you catch. Never worked for me that way. But like I said, that actually a good market would be, like I said, just again the pay lake market down here. And then the catfish is again just sold as pond stockers, as food. Again, catfish is also very cheap. Like I said, if you think of going to the store and buying some catfish, that market is, like I said, the fillets are very, very cheap. And again, one of the reasons for that is just competing with the industry down south. They have a longer growing season. Your inputs are going to be higher than I guess, turning them loose down south and then feeding them. And then also, it's just above here again. I mentioned the pay lake market to be sold. Like we have local pay lakes that actually buy some of the bigger fish. Depends on how long you want to keep them and how long you want to raise them for. This is one actually I read just a couple weeks ago on the hybrid striped bass for aquaponics. Again, I don't know anyone that's actually doing this right now, but there was a study. Actually, not a study. They were recommending it. They called it, like I said, just tilapia was the king of aquaponics, and then, like I said, this would be the new kid on the block. I don't know, but just it's a warm water, does well in warm water, tolerates low DOs to a short period of time. Most of the fingerlings, they come from Arkansas, so you have to, with any hybrid, they do not reproduce. So you're constantly be buying a fingerling to put in your system if it's something that you would be so inclined to do. Again, most of them are sold live. Most of them are sold actually, like I said, on the East Coast, a lot of the bigger markets, a lot of the Asian markets. And like I said, it's a way, but then there's trucking fees and things like that. But like I said, the highest, I guess the highest profit is usually always sold live. Walleye, and I'll throw in even a saw guy with that, is as of right now, I don't think there's anyone growing them in Ohio. There has been some, they're grown in Minnesota and Wisconsin. There has been some interest in that. I can't say if it's, again, this is a species, we've raised it here once. This was actually before I even worked here. And very hard to manage from what I understand. Like Bill's back there just shaking his head no, because I think he was part of it. I got to see the clay injection system that they hooked up because with all those, one thing you notice on that picture is the teeth. So with that, they're eating other fish, and the way I understand it, they had to inject clay into the water to keep the water submerged that they couldn't see each other, so they wouldn't eat each other. Again, but if you've ever had walleye, most of it's caught. It's been lake caught. Very good fish to eat. Again, there's hurdles with everything. So I'm not saying that you can never raise this, but there is like some hurdles that you actually have to jump. The paddlefish, I think Matt might have mentioned just the passive aquaculture, or just even, another one right there, the reservoir ranching, large bodies of water. Basically, you throw them in and then you forget about them. They're just constantly, growing. And then, but you look at the times there. That's not a quick turnaround of any product. But it's just, you're not doing a whole lot with it. But we get interest in people say, I have a 5-acre, pond, or even call it a small lake, and just, what can I put in it? And it's just something, that you can throw it in there and forget about it. And 5 years, a lot of time it's actually pulled out with a net, and then able to make like I said, maybe a little bit of money, a little bit of side money on that. The aquatic plants and the others. The only one I can leave up there is the pond plants, because there is regulations have changed. There's a fungus. I think it's Bacterium cryptoid or something fungus. If anyone really wants to know the name, I have it written down. I can, but it's a very serious fungus to amphibians. So like the state is saying you're not allowed to sell any tadpoles, frogs, snails. I know I see everybody's face just sad now because that's what they really wanted to grow was frogs and tadpoles. But no to that. You're not allowed to do that anymore. These are some of, like I said, I'll say the newer species. It's been that's kind of they're not new, but new to Ohio. Just the marine shrimp. It's an RAS. It's a recirculating aquaculture. It's in the Midwest now. We actually have a few growers in the state doing it. Very high energy cost, but it is one of the highest consumed seafood products. So is that a way that you can market locally grown marine shrimp? That's the one thing, again, just keep stressing that marketing. You can grow anything, but you have to be able to sell it. And then, possible using the water, like I said, to grow. Again, it's a very warm water, animal, to be using it to grow any other species with that. And then just another, like I said, just a barramundi. That is again, it's in the Midwest also. Apparently a very hardy species. Again, I'm not familiar at all with this species, but there is people that's growing it. And it feed trains well. Like I said, from what I understand, it's very, very simple hatchery production. It's very hardy, and like I said, I really like that picture because it makes it look like their eyes are glowing. Could have got some other pictures, I know, but I do enjoy that. And they feed train well, so that's one of the things. Some of the species I mentioned before, they don't feed train well. I know, like bass, we've had some trouble with feed training bass. So that's one thing, one of the positives. And again, if you're really interested in a barramundi, I can point you in the right direction to some people that know a lot more than I do. But it is worth a mention. And again, just that, I'll give you, say, the reality check. like I said, just make sure that you, how can I add value to my product? Again, whatever species it may be. Like I said, just the, is it going to sell to a certain grower, a certain producer? You know, and then think about the processing, how you're going to, process. But it always goes back, to the marketing. That's, again, the one thing I've probably said now 5 or 6 times, but I think it's very, very important. And just, have that business plan, and we do work with you, like I said, throughout these next 10 months that they'll actually be able to, should all have a very good business plan by the time this course is over. Any questions? Yes, sir.
On the marine shrimp, you listed that as a duo crop. What other species would you raise with those?
Well, actually, the one I had seen was actually the barramundi, because they like that warm water. And just again, I don't know anybody that's doing it, but I can pull up that article. They were raising that because it handles the salt water also.
All right, so for those of you that are a little newer, I know a few of you have actually been to Doug and Jenny's farm, but this is Jenny and her husband's Doug in the back. They own Fresh Harvest Farms near Columbus. So they're going to talk to you a little bit today, and they are also part of the March OAA workshop. I know a lot of you guys saw that flyer, so if you get a chance, the second half of that workshop will actually be located at their farm on kind of a small tour setup. So if you guys get a chance to do that, I would definitely take advantage of it. They're both a wealth of knowledge, and they have tons of experience, and they're always more than willing to help all of us. So we really appreciate them being able to be here.
Before I get started, I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you have heard me speak, heard Doug and I talk? How many of you have been to our farm?
Oh, I lied.
Okay. So some of this may be repeating, and I'm sorry, but they say it takes 3 times. You have to hear something 3 times to remember it. So, that hopefully will help. My presentation today is really a basic presentation because I wasn't sure where you guys were, but we can have lots of question and answer, not only with me, but also with Doug later. So I just simply decided to do an aquaponics basic. So this is just a picture of our first greenhouse. Of course, aquaponics is a symbiotic relationship between the plants and the fish. You can't, in aquaponics, if you don't have fish or some kind of aquatic species, you're not going to have aquaponics. You're just going to have what would be the opposite of aquaponics, hydroponics. Benefits, I'm sure you all have read these somewhere, but the benefits of aquaponics, the reduction in the wastewater because it's recirculated, we're using the nutrients that the fish are providing. It uses less water, uses less energy than traditional farming. The minimal need for land because of the compact nature. Most of the facilities can be located close to your market, so somebody in a city could actually do this, depending on the size that you want to do. It supports locavorism, produces the organic food source. You can have a system that is organically certified. You get to produce year-round. Your plants do grow 2 to 3 times faster, and you can grow 3 times more as much in a smaller space. So in aquaponics, there are many types of systems, large, small, all in between, but there are, other than that, besides, there are a couple of different ones. The deep water culture, where the plants float on rafts and grow in about 12 inches of water. You have the NFT system, which you typically see with hydroponic systems, where there's just a thin layer of water running down through a channel. And then a media system, where the plants grow in some type of media, whether it be hydrogen balls or shell, is that what it is, or recycled glass. small systems that people do. We every year at the Ohio State Fair, and I'm going to put a plug in for this right now. Every year at the Ohio State Fair, the Ohio Farm Bureau has asked us to put displays of aquaponics at the fair, and we always focus on what people can do themselves. So somebody who is living in an urban environment, if they wanted to do this so that they could grow food for their family, we try to come up with systems that they can build for next to nothing and have in their own backyard, basement, or garage. These are two examples of barrelponics that we did the last couple of years. And the reason I'm putting that plug in, I have not heard from the Ohio Farm Bureau about the fair yet, but that doesn't mean I won't. If I do, I will be seeking volunteers from you all who are interested in aquaponics to help us be there to talk with people about it. Because the booth that they have, we have to man it 80% of the time that the fair is open. That particular building is open. Need lots of people to help talk about aquaponics. And another system, IBC totes can go a little bit bigger. You can use those. So you don't necessarily have to buy a pre-made system, you know, where they fabricate beds and fish tanks. You can use a lot of stuff that you can find locally and for next to nothing. Basic idea of how aquaponics works, and I'm pretty sure you're all getting that already, but it's a recirculating system. And we, at Fresh Harvest, we have 3 big greenhouses that are all based on the deep water culture. And this is just an example of how we originally wanted to set up one of our systems. Our systems kind of look like this, but there's some things that we have found that didn't work that we've now taken out. But basically the water flows from the big fish tank over to a solids barrel and then into troughs. And it all is worked on gravity because each one of these troughs is 1 inch lower than the other. So it creates like a stair step. That way we don't have to have a pump in every trough. We're not using the energy, electricity to pump water. There's only 1 pump, and it is in a sub-tank down here. And that's the lowest point. And that sump pump then, in that tank, that 1 pump, pumps water back up into this big fish tank. So that's the only energy other than the air blower that we use in our system. And this is just an example when we first built our first system of how it's plumbed together. When I talked about the air line, we have an air blower behind this wall here, and all the air is coming through in these PVC pipes. It goes around the top of this fish tank. We have air stones hanging down in there. And then there are more PVC pipes that come up and around and go into each one of these beds. You can see this pipe here, that's an air pipe. So there's air stones in each one of these troughs about every 8 to 10 feet, providing oxygen into the water because you're growing in water. Plants don't necessarily need soil to grow, but they do need water, but they also need oxygen. So you're putting oxygen into the water through that air blower. And then the water comes from the fish tank, and again, it's all gravity fed, so it comes out of here and into that media barrel and then into that trough. And it flows down this way, through a pipe, up through this way, all using stand pipes to level out your water in your trough. And then again, it comes down and back into the next one and over around, so it creates kind of a zigzag flow. Even though the water is flowing, you never really see it flowing unless you see it flowing into the sump tank and then into a stand pipe. Otherwise, if you're just looking out here in this trough, it's not like you're seeing water flow by like in a creek or something. The whole basic principle of aquaponics and growing plants is that there's a nitrogen cycle. So you have your fish. Your fish are eating, happily swimming around in your little tank. What are they doing when they're in there? They're eating, so they're giving off waste. but they're also breathing, and through their gills they're giving off ammonia. All of that goes through a cycle which creates these two different types of bacteria. The one the ammonia that's converted to nitrites, and then the nitrites are converted to nitrates, which then is absorbed by your plants, making them grow. There's a lot more to those technical terms and all of that bacteria that goes on. The way that I explain it to school children is that it's like an ecosystem. We have taken an outdoor creek or pond and brought it inside and created an ecosystem. And you know how you see things growing around creeks or rivers or ponds. And that's just what we're doing. We're putting the plants on top of water. In aquaponics, you have a variety of things that you can grow. A lot of different plants. These are just some of the things that I've mentioned that we have grown that I know will grow successfully in aquaponics. I've heard of a lot more. I have friends who are in Florida, they've actually grown watermelon in their system. So we grow kale, lettuce, herbs, cucumbers, some of the best cucumbers. And I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that there's no chemical fertilizer or pesticides, but we've had a lot of people who say, oh, I love cucumbers, but I can't eat cucumbers because they just give me gas and make me burp. And it's like, try these cucumbers. For some reason, nobody ever has a problem eating them. I don't know if it's because of that whole lacking chemical in its growing process. Cherry tomatoes grow really, really well. They're, tomatoes, as you know, everybody wants to grow tomatoes, but they're very high nutrient feeders, so they'll take a lot of the nutrients out of your system if you're growing other things. So we tend to grow just cherry tomatoes, and they seem to do really well. Believe it or not, yes, we actually grow beets sometimes in our system. And if you'll notice these beets, they look a little funny. That's because when you plant them in a net pot, put them in the raft and they start growing, they kind of form to your net pot. So instead of looking like a round beet would, they look more like a muffin. But they taste really good. So, basics of growing your plants, starting them out is the same as when you would grow them in the raft. The type of media that we use to grow our seeds and start our plants in is not your typical peat moss or plant and soil that you get at a gardening store. We actually use coconut coir. And what it is, it's the byproduct of a coconut shell. It's that brown, hairy stuff on the outside. They take it and they grind it up really fine. And when you get a bag of it and open it up, it almost smells like dirt. And you feel it and it's like, oh, it smells like really rich dirt. And then we mix it with a little bit of vermiculite, which is a mineral that helps hold moisture. And sometimes we actually mix in a little bit of oyster shells. That way those oyster shells break down and just kind of leach calcium into the system, which is good for the plants. But we start them in seed trays, 72 cell seed trays. Put them in there, and we put them in a seedling table that we have, a big seedling table. And then we feed water from the system into that seedling table so that the seeds take it up and start growing from there. And then when they get to be about this size here is when we transplant them into the system. Now, when we first started out, just a little tip here. When we first started out, we started them in those net pots. And are you guys familiar with what net pots are? You know, the little round, 2-inch round, and they have slits in them. We used to put the core in there, put the seeds in there, then put them in the seed tray, the seed table. But when you put that water in there, it kind of washes all of that away because there's so much space for it to go out. So we started using seed trays instead. There's one of the net pots. The seed tray. So As the plants grow, the nutrients are whipped up from the water through the plant roots that are hanging down in the water. So that's how they're getting their nutrients. They just hang out, the roots just hang out there, and as the water flows by, they take up the nutrients as they need it. It's kind of like you or I, when we're thirsty. We drink water when we're thirsty, so we take it. If we don't want it, we don't use it, right? And that's exactly what the plants are doing with the nutrients. And then sometimes some of your plants will give you a nice little root blanket to use. Taking care of your plants in your aquaponic systems are really pretty easy. It serves as a biofilter for your fish, because it kind of cleans your water out for your fish. The nutrifying bacteria does grow on everything. It starts to adhere to everything in your system. Remember, I was saying you're creating a little ecosystem. So like a lot of times you'll go into, well, when you come out to our farm, you look at our fish tanks. On the side of our fish tanks, you'll see like an amber color thing growing. It's like a slime type. It's not anything bad. It's not something we're going to get rid of, because that's actually where the bacteria is growing. It also grows in all of your troughs and the bottom of your rafts. In your media, if you're using a media bed, it'll adhere. All those little pockets in those stones, hydro balls, clay balls, it likes to hide in there. I talked about oxygen, how we put the air stones in there. Light, of course you need light. We grow in greenhouses. So far we haven't used any type of artificial light other than over our seed table, because we have it in another room now. So it doesn't get natural light. But so far we haven't used any artificial light in our greenhouses, even in the winter. Interestingly enough though, Doug and I, although we want our business to be consistent and we want to always be having plants grow, we also realize that we kind of have an obligation to test out things so that we can share with other people who are growing in our area what works and what doesn't work. So we were talking on the way down here, we've had so many great days. I mean, I don't know, how many of you are from somewhat north of Columbus? I mean, we just had 6 inches of snow at our farm. We had snow on the ground, and the further south we came, it's like, wow, there's green grass down here. We're so happy to see it. But we've had a lot of great days. We were just talking about how maybe we should try putting some lights over maybe half of a trough in one of the greenhouses to see if that would make a difference. So you never know, but then you have to start thinking about, okay, what kind of cost will that add to the operation? Water temperature, we have found an optimum water temperature at around 70 degrees is good for the fish. It keeps them active and eating, which is very important. But it also, the plants seem to like that water temperature. Can you always keep it at a constant 70? Unfortunately, no. So you keep it in the range somewhere around there. Always monitoring the total dissolved solids, your waste. Make sure you don't get too many, because if you get too much of it, it could be bad. Throws off your whole water quality and throws off your pH. So you need to constantly check your water quality. Not only is it important for your plants, but also for your fish. This is just more pictures. This is our greenhouse when we first started out, when we first finally got some plants that were actually starting to grow. You can tell, like when the nutrients from each trough, when the nutrients were getting more and more and more in each trough, because the plants would start growing faster and faster and faster. So much so to this point we had to, when this picture was taken, we had already harvested everything out of this trough. So.
What's the covering of the greenhouse made of?
The greenhouse is covered in 2 layers of 6 milliliter, 6 mil plastic. So, and it's inflated in between for insulation. And one has a UV protector on it. Of course, with any plants, if you grow outside, you're going to have pests. If you grow inside, you're going to have pests. There's no way around it. So our biggest problem is aphids. we can do everything possible to not have aphids come in, but they do. However they get in there, I don't know, but they love our greenhouses. So we use beneficial insects because we cannot use a pesticide to kill anything like that. We have even tried using a safe neem oil, and we found that it affects our fish. So therefore, we choose not to use anything. Instead, we use beneficial insects. Here we had our little praying mantis here. He was really nice for a while until he started eating my ladybugs. So then he had to go. This is called a green lacewing. They're, the aphids like to feed on their larvae, and then they get bigger, they lay more, they keep eating the aphids. But the best is the ladybug. I buy ladybugs by the tens of thousands every year. They're really, truly inexpensive to buy. The most expensive part about it is having them shipped overnight because they're a live bug. You've got to have them shipped overnight, and as soon as you get them, you have to release them. But believe it or not, this winter we've actually had ladybugs survive in our greenhouse over the winter. So when it gets really cold, we tend to leave some leaves that have fallen off the plants lay on the rafts because they'll hide under there when it gets cold to stay warm, and that's how they stay alive. Fish and aquaponics, you guys have heard a lot about that already this morning, from what I understand. I'll just give you kind of our little take on it. When we were first deciding to do aquaponics, and we had gone to our little workshop in Florida, and learned all about, how to set up a system. And then all they talked about was tilapia, using tilapia. They talked about the water temperature of tilapia. And Doug and I were like, there's no way in Ohio can we raise tilapia because we would have to heat that water. It's going to cost a lot of money. So we're like, how do we do this? What do we grow? What kind of fish do we choose? So Doug, being the internet person that he is, he found that there was a aquaculture workshop happening here, and it was all about choosing what type of species of fish you wanted to raise in an aquaculture business. So we came down and we took the class or the workshop and got to go out to the barn and see all the different types of fish. And any of you who've heard me talk before, I don't like fish. I don't eat fish. I don't want to touch fish. Nothing about fish. So we're sitting there, we're learning all about it. We're talking, we talked to then the extension person about it, and we told her what we were doing. She kind of giggled, said, "Good luck." Okay. So we decided on perch because in our area we knew that there were some perch farmers. So we contacted one. Yeah, I'll get you some fish. I'll get you some fish. We're ready for fish. He hasn't brought fish yet. So then I get a call from Bill. Bill brings me fish. So that's yellow perch is our friend. We love yellow perch. And this actually is one of our first yellow perch that we harvested. So, but that's why we chose it. And we also, in looking at all the different types, and as Bill said, saying about the sea bass, we had to consider the market. Is there a market for yellow perch in Ohio? Absolutely. So, again, tilapia typically used for several reasons. They grow very fast. I mean, we harvest our fish one time a year. I mean, we have them on a rotation, so every 6 months we're actually having a fish harvest. But we have to keep those fish for a year before we can harvest them and sell them. So that's one of the differences between tilapia. They grow pretty fast and you're harvesting and selling them sooner.
What do you do with them?
Do with our fish. We currently sell them to another fish farmer in batches, and he uses them sells them for pond stocking and such. So yeah, they're tolerant to the water quality conditions changing. They're kind of, from what I understand, they're kind of like goldfish. So, but they need that higher water temperature, and in Ohio it's very expensive to heat fish tanks of water especially if you're using a tank heater, an aquatic tank heater. Yellow or lake perch, they're native to Ohio, so they're used to our cold winters. Their water temperature, it'd be lower. But they're more sensitive to that water quality, so we have to make sure that we keep our water quality good. And actually, we've learned from our fish how to tell what our water quality is. I mean, we do still test it, but we have learned from them. Doug knows now when he goes in the morning, feeds the fish, throws the fish food in there. If they start coming up eating aggressively, things are good. If there's one dead fish in that tank, he throws that food in there, they're not coming up to eat. He'll sit there and watch them, and if they still don't come up to eat, then he starts searching for a dead fish. So that's 9 times out of 10 what it is. It's just there's dead fish in the tank. And you're going to have dead fish. Just face that right off the bat. Fish die for unknown reasons. You'll go in there and there'll be a fish floating. You just take it out. You know, as long as you don't go in there and the whole tank is dead, you're fine. I mean, if you have a whole tank that's dead, there's probably human error involved in some way. I mean, we've had fish, we'll feed them, they eat aggressively, and suddenly one starts floating. You take it out, and there's a ton of fish food in his mouth because he gorged himself. So, the first few hurt you. After that, you're like, oh well, the fish. Fish should be stocked at a maximum biomass for productivity because you want them to be able to produce enough nutrients for your plants to grow. Because you need plants, you need to be selling stuff. You've got to watch your fish health. I mean, one little thing can happen and it can literally spread through your tank. If you have little kids that go to school, and you have 3 children and one comes home with a cold, how soon is it for everybody in the household has the cold? Just like fish. One fish gets something, it goes through all of them. So you need to watch that. They eat regularly, they have a schedule, and they, believe it or not, they know when they're to be fed and when they're not. Do not exceed half a pound of fish per gallon. That is, I think, Phil, is that a right?
Yeah, you did it 1 year though, but you were.
I'm sorry?
You actually almost got 6 tenths of a pound per gallon that first year.
Yeah.
Because you were aerating heavily and the plants were doing well, you were able to pull it off.
Right. But that's wouldn't push the limits too much. Water quality, nobody can stress water quality enough. Watch your pH levels. One thing I will say about that, pH levels, a lot of people say, oh, you've got to have your pH level between this and this. I mean, some areas where you're using your water, like our well comes out at 7.2. And that's what it maintains at 7.2. If it goes up for some reason, then we're worried. But we're not trying to keep it down under 7 because that's what it comes out at our well. And everything works well at that. Nitrates, you want them low. Nitrites, you want them high. Calcium, iron, those are 2 things that aren't going to come into the system on its own through fish waste. It's not something that happens through the ecosystem. Remember I said sometimes we mix oyster shells, and that's where we add the calcium. Some of your plants need more calcium than others, and it doesn't seem to hurt the fish. The small amount that's, those things will take a long time to break down in the system. Iron, that's another thing, depending on what you're growing, sometimes your plants need more iron, sometimes less. With what we grow currently, which is mostly kale, we're adding chelated iron into our system, I'd say 3 to 4 times a year, just to have that extra boost to make sure we maintain it. And you notice when you need iron because your plants start to get a little yellow. So. Other trace minerals, I think somebody was mentioning potassium or potassium with it. Those are things, other trace minerals we don't really measure for in our systems. It's the other ones that we really watch. So if one of our plants starts looking kind of funny, I mean, we'll start looking and seeing, oh, do we need to add something? So far, we haven't really needed to add anything else. A lot of people wonder when they're doing an aquaponics, where should I do it? Should I do it outside? Should I do it inside? Should I build a greenhouse? Should I already have a pole barn. I already have a barn. I have a warehouse. I have a garage. Everybody wonders what they should do. First, determine your climate, the region that you're going to grow in. You're all in Ohio. It's cold, it's windy, it's rainy, it snows. You're probably going to be inside. Then you need to determine, are you going to grow all year round? Growing indoors does allow for that. Southern states and tropical regions can grow outside with caution. In Hawaii, most of the farms are open air. They have learned from some hurricanes that have passed by that the wind can be pretty brutal to them. Biggest thing you're going to think about is the cost of heating, cooling, and lighting for those areas. When we first started out, we built one greenhouse that was 35 feet wide, 72 feet long, 18 and a half feet to the peak. And we decided that we were going to use propane to heat the greenhouse. We had 2 heaters, one at each end, and a 1,000-gallon propane tank. We were really lucky our first year. It was a very, very mild winter. We actually had no heat in our greenhouse until the end of January. Simply because we couldn't get the heater, and the propane company couldn't install the tank in the line. But we were really lucky. It was a very, very mild winter. Then comes along a couple more winters. And then we have this winter called the polar vortex, multiple polar vortex. Not a good time to have propane heat the greenhouse. So you have to think about that. Again, you also want to think about your water. I mean, we want our fish to eat. Perch do okay if their water temperature is above 55. They'll still eat. They like it better if it's more like 60, 65 or above. But when you have a polar vortex and you're heating your fish tanks to keep just your fish tanks warm, so your fish will eat, with aquatic heaters, tank heaters, it's very expensive. I can put one of those in our 1,400-gallon tank of fish to heat that. As soon as I turn it on within a week, my electric bill has doubled. Keep going and adding more tanks and more of those. Your electric bill almost gets to be as much as your heating bill. So, you also have some other issues. Like we had a regulator freeze on our propane tank, which caused a freeze out in our greenhouse, lots of crops. So you need to think about those things. We have now switched over to a wood-burning boiler system that heats all 3 of our greenhouses. And it also allows for a heat exchange of water for our fish tanks, so we're no longer using those tank heaters. Dramatically reduced our heating and electric bills by doing that. So think about those things. If you have to use artificial lighting, there are a lot of really good LED lights out there that are really cost efficient. You might pay more for them in the beginning, but they will pay for themselves over time. Okay, so you've grown this, you've grown fish, you've grown your plants. It's time to sell it. Where are you going to sell it? So many people ask me this. I probably do a whole little session on how do I do this. We started out at farmers markets. When Doug and I were talking about doing this, one of the things Doug said to me was, I know I can grow it, I just don't know if we can sell it. I stared at him and I looked at him and I said, I know I can sell it, I don't know that you can grow it. So we had the total opposite thoughts. So we just kind of left it there. Doug and I are, thankfully we have a very good relationship where I know what his strengths are, he knows what my strengths are. So I let him grow it, he let me sell it. So the first thought was, I network everywhere. And if you're not the type of person who will just start talking to somebody because you think this person's going to get me in contact with this person or whatever, you might have to come out of your shell, step out of the box, and say, I can do this. Because I have been to so many places with Doug or with my daughters who roll their eyes at me all the time. Or friends will be eating, and I'll be eating their salad in a restaurant, and I don't like the lettuce. And so I'll ask her, how do you guys get your lettuce? Oh, I'm not really sure. Could you ask the chef, please? Next thing I know, I'm talking to a chef, or I'm talking to a manager. The next thing I know, I have an appointment with whoever is in charge of buying lettuce. The next thing I know, I'm selling them my lettuce. Or, I know John over here who has a friend who runs a restaurant. I don't know John really well. Certainly don't know his friend who runs a restaurant. But we're at the same function together. I think I'm going to go introduce myself. You know, I just introduced myself. I'll even say, so what kind of business are you in? It may not be anything related, but there's something that he might say to me that I can just pick up on. And somehow, hey, guess what? I grow this. I hear you have a friend. Next thing I know, I'm having a meeting with his friend and I'm supplying his restaurant. I've done those connections. I mean, you've all heard of Jenny's ice cream, right? So I work at a private school where her daughter goes. I'm like, okay, she does this ice cream and she does a lot of, buys local ingredients. And you're thinking, Jenny, how can you really get into Jenny's ice cream with your products? Jenny's ice cream is made from a lot of local products such as lavender, basil, thyme, dill. I can grow all of those things in my aquaponics system. Yes, I work at the same school where her daughter attends, but am I just going to walk up to her and say that? No. I happen to be in charge of the ambassador group for our students who are learning leadership skills. And I'm running the speaker series. You all see where this is leading? Speaker series, I need a speaker. I need somebody who's an entrepreneur who's brought themselves up, created a brand. Oh, let me call Jenny. Jenny comes in, she talks, we start talking, find out where she's buying some of her products, talk to her about what I can grow. She's like, let me have so-and-so call you. So-and-so calls me and says, you know what, we don't necessarily want you to grow, but we do catering. We'd like to buy some of your lettuce for our catering. Make the connection. You just have to really talk. You have to network to get those kinds of connections. And you talk with everybody. You're a fish farmer. To sell your fish, where you get your fish from. If you buy your fingerlings local, talk to your fish farmer. They'll help. They'll give you some ideas. I also have to deliver to a restaurant, North Market. Guess what's at North Market? There's a whole fish thing. Fish. What do you call them? Fish guys. They're called the fish guys, actually. I mean, you know, I'm walking by. I'm like looking at the different fish. I'm like, do you guys ever buy perch? Well, now I'm talking to the guy. You know, he's like, how much perch do you have, and when do you harvest it? And, you know, he would like to buy local perch. So, you know, sometimes it takes time. I mean, I've been talking with this guy now for about 6-7 months, but one of these days he's going to buy my perch. So, but again, we started out at farmers market. So when we did that, you had to think, okay, I went to some farmers markets. I just kind of looked at people's displays, decide how are we going to display this. You know, most places you need a tent. You can't have lettuce sitting out in the sunlight, trust me. You know, how people set up their tables, all of that. So, farmers markets are a very popular place to start because there's one every day of the week, probably, where you live. You might have to travel a little distance, maybe a half hour or so. Literally, there's one almost every day of the week. When we were doing them during the summer, some weeks we did 4 a week. We can handle that much. Promotes local buying. Everybody wants to buy local these days. They want to know where their food's coming from. Very popular. Customers love being face-to-face with their farmers. So they love learning how you grow. They'll ask you really good questions. Bad part about it is it's variable income. Some of it is weather dependent. Rain, snow, sunshine. I mean, I've been out there at a farmer's market in all of it, where you're holding down, there's two people holding down the tent arms because the wind's blowing and the rain's coming around. But that makes your income variable. Some, for example, my Saturday morning markets. Some markets I made $1,000 in 3 hours. Some days I made 100. It depended. So I couldn't always count on it being a consistent income. It was time consuming because you have time, you have to get ready, you have to pack your stuff, you have to have a vehicle to carry it all there, you have to unpack it, you have to sell it, you have to pack it back up, you have to go home, you have to unpack, you have to clean up everything. So it is time consuming. And you have variable crop waste. And what I mean by that is if you don't sell and you've already harvested, what are you going to do with that? You're going to take it home, you're going to throw it away. If you live on a farm and you have animals, you're going to feed it to your animals. So it's not really waste, it's just feeding your animals. Or you have it and you take it to the local food pantry. And they accept it. Again, display. Doug and I were like, one of the best things about aquaponics is that you're harvesting it right there. So Doug built this really cool little display system where we had these rain gutters. We could take the plants out of the racks, fill in their net pots, roots and all, put them in there, take them to the market, and when somebody said, I want that head of lettuce, we could cut it and harvest it right there for them. That also was kind of a twofold because I wasn't harvesting this, it wasn't going to go to waste if I didn't sell it. I could take it back and put it in the system and it continued growing until the next farmer's market. Where over here, all of this stuff has already been harvested, so it's going to go bad if I don't sell it. So, kind of an idea of how our thinking went. Restaurant contracts, steady income. You establish a routine. There's no waste because you know what you're harvesting, which was kind of one of the nice parts about it. Because they're ordering, you get set on a routine and they'll tell you, I want this much, this many pounds of kale every week. I want this many heads of lettuce every week. So it's steady income. I know what I'm going to get. I know what my routine is. I know what days I'm harvesting, what days I'm delivering. And I'm not harvesting any more than I need.
What are the downfalls? Those seem like all the benefits.
Downfalls of restaurants are, I'm going to tell you, I haven't really found any that are really a downfall other than when you have something happen at your farm. You have to remember you are a farmer. Just because you're not out there plowing the field and picking it out there, you're still a farmer. You have issues. When we had the polar vortex winter and we had a freeze out and we lost our crop, I had to go to those restaurants and say, we had an issue, a natural disaster. As long as you're communicating, and that's the biggest thing I'm going to tell you, communicate with your restaurant people. Most of the time you're going to be talking to the chef. Just tell them what's going on. Or if for some reason you're going to be a little short one week on something, whatever you do, don't try and compensate by going and buying it from someplace else to give it to them. Because it's not your product. Just talk to them. So. Another downfall is if you have a husband who does home delivery in the city. And that's a joke. So, you know, when you don't drive, when you don't drive in the city very often, some people just don't like driving in the city. So, this is just a picture of our first greenhouse. What you see when you're in there from the road. And these are just pictures of when we were building our system, so you kind of get an idea of, you know, putting up the structure of a greenhouse should you choose that to do that. I mean, this was putting our first arch up. I mean, Doug and I built the greenhouse, the first greenhouse ourselves, the first and second greenhouse ourselves. I mean, we ordered the frames, they came, dug the holes, put the cement in. We were fortunate enough to have our son who works at a sign company had this lift for us to hold up our arches while we put them in. You know, put them all in. Then we get this point. Now it's time to start building our troughs, and then they're built, they're lined, and they're filling. And it was really interesting at this point to see how, when the, I was telling you the ecosystem, the bacteria, each one of these troughs, as the bacteria grew, would turn an amber color. The water would turn an amber color. So you'd have like really amber, clear water from here on over. And then this one would become amber color, and then you'd have clear. It's kind of a neat process to watch. So that's about it. For the basics, I know I've took you guys way past your one. I work in a school, I know how important that is. So, any questions? You and then Neil.
Hey Jim, what kind of price difference did you get from the farmers markets to the restaurants? I know typically they'll try to beat you down on price.
There is absolutely a price difference. You have to remember, those restaurants can buy from the produce company and get whatever they're getting much cheaper. But if you're going to a restaurant that wants to buy local, they're going to understand that they're going to pay more than the produce company. For example, at a farmer's market, a head of lettuce, I would sell a head of lettuce for $3. By the way, deal in even numbers. Do not deal in $1.25. Otherwise, then you have to carry coin, and it's really heavy. So I would sell a head of lettuce for $3. I'd sell it to a restaurant for $2. So it's not a huge price difference. I didn't go half. I kept it a little bit more than half because I still have to use my gas to get it down there.
So I sat down and talked to Han Ping, hopefully one final last time, and we'll have to do it over again, about projects and what our final idea is that kind of incorporates situations and ideas and scenarios of almost everyone in this room. So ideally, you know, we're kind of in the same boat that we were before. So with your projects, we want it to be a hands-on idea, for sure. We feel like you guys would learn the most that way. Before we said that, you know, it would be an individual project. Now, I've had some people talk to me about working in groups. If you have someone that has a functioning facility already and they're willing to bring you in on a group project, we're okay with that. If that's what you want to do, just make sure that when you actually go through with your project that you guys are there together. You're documenting together, you are doing your, you know, data collection together, everything that you need to do. And then when you actually write your reports, if you did them together, they should look fairly similar. They don't need to be identical. You know, you can have a different interpretation of what you guys did, and that's fine. But we want to make sure that if you're utilizing someone else's system and you're supposed to be a group, you guys are working as a group together. If you don't want to do a group and you have your own system, that's fine. You can work individually. That's not a problem. And we want you to be able to monitor it throughout the year. So before, we kind of had the idea of doing a project here in Piketon, but the only problem with that is you're only here once a month. And I can almost guarantee that no one wants to come here more than once a month. So the only problem with that is how much you're going to learn from looking at a system once a month compared to utilizing a system that you may already have or that you could get set up closer to where you are or where, you know, a group member may be. So we kind of changed that around a little bit. But regardless, we want you guys to be able to record the process and the data that you collect. So this is a project. We're not doing it just for the fun of it. We kind of want you guys to learn as much as you possibly can. So you need to record your data. And when I say data, I don't just mean DO every single day, pH every single day. You know, you can do those as much or as little as you think you need to do, and your project will show for it. But we want you guys to kind of dive into learning how to do some of those things. I realize I just had to buy a DO meter for our system last week, and I can almost guarantee that you guys don't have $1,500 sitting in your back pocket, because I know I didn't. So it's expensive. So we don't expect you guys to have all of these meters and all these tools readily available. So however you can monitor your system is what you can do. So we understand that. We don't expect to see, you know, your DO measurement every day for, you know, from now until December. So we understand that. I'm fine with that. And then you can still have your choice between aquaculture and aquaponics. You know, that's up to you guys. Whatever you feel like you want to do for a project is completely up to you. I will say this, if you already have a system and you want to utilize the system you already have, that's fine. But we do ask that you maybe change an aspect of your project that you have going already. So I know I talked to a few of you that have had your system running, you know, for however long, and you've been doing great and everything is really working out great. And that's fantastic. And I don't want to be the one to make you kill all your fish or change any aspect that's going to mess it all up. But we want you to be able to try something new that maybe you don't know whether it will or will not turn out as good. And if you kill all your fish, I'm sorry. I can't guarantee that I'll replace them all, but I'll send a few tilapia your way. I guarantee it. All right. So, aquaponics components. So, not really just with an aquaponics system, but with both systems, even if you have ponds, things like that. These are kind of just things that you need to think about. These really relate more to an aquaponics system, so things that you really need to have a functioning system is a fish tank, a place to grow your plants, whether that's, you know, I've seen it all, really. I've seen kitty litter trays with plants in them. I've seen just all kinds of stuff. So if it holds a plant, I suppose you can put a plant there. You need water pumps, air pumps, your tubing, your irrigation to run all of those. Some things are optional. You don't really need a water heater. You don't really need a grow light, or I guess maybe filtration. Now that I think about it, Matt complains to me every single day. Our system does not have a clarifier on it. So Paul insists we need a clarifier. I think we need a clarifier, but we don't have a clarifier. So everything's optional. I mean, you can only do what you can do. So we don't expect you to have a state-of-the-art system that, you know, came out of a nice magazine. But these are some of the basic things that you may want to think about. So when we say starting smaller is better, we don't necessarily mean that we want you to do kind of like what Doug and Jenny did and order a small greenhouse and then just decide we're going big or we're going home. So I don't know that I would do that, but you know, it worked for them. So if that's what you want to do, I'm all for it. I'll come visit. I'll let you know how you're doing. But on a small scale, some of the things that you can utilize that a lot of people don't really think about is a smaller aquarium, stock tanks. I know probably every farmer I can think of that has 1 million stock tanks sitting around. So if that's what you can use to put your fish in, it'll hold fish. How about it? We have the half barrel system, just like this system, just a little bit different. They call that a chop system. So you just have your 1 barrel and you cut the top 4th off and literally flip it over, and that becomes your grow bed. That's what holds your plants. So it's kind of like this system, just set up a little bit different. But like I said, the aquariums, you know, they're made to hold fish. So if you have one, if you don't have one, I might be able to lend you one, but we'll talk. Medium fish tanks. So a lot of people talk about having IBC totes that are sitting around. So if you have something like that that you can utilize, that's fine. We don't necessarily care what your system's made out of. If it's a tank and it holds fish, and it's a bed and it holds plants, I don't see why it wouldn't work. I wouldn't recommend the bathtub really, but I mean, if it works for you, if you got an extra bathtub sitting around, that's fine. My papaw feeds the cows next door out of bathtub, so I can't say anything. So, but you can build your own as well. So, to large fish tanks. This is probably a little more advanced than what most of you are on, but if you're at this level, that's fine. An open pond, large stock tanks. I don't even know, Jenny and Doug, you guys don't have large stock tanks, do you? No? Okay, so you don't even need those. And they're doing just fine, so unless you want to swim.
We have one actual large aquaculture tank.
Okay.
The rest are actually agricultural white tanks that you cut the top off.
Okay, well, there you go. So that's an option as well, fiberglass tanks, or if you want to go swimming with your fish, you can put them in the swimming pool. All right, safe materials. So this is something that I feel gets kind of overlooked a lot of times, that some people don't really think about. But when you deal with a system like aquaponics, even with, fish in itself, you don't want anything leaching into your water, whether that's the plastic that your tank's made out of, or any of the metals that you use. Copper is extremely toxic to fish, so you definitely don't want to use anything like that. But you want to make sure that your system components are not only fish safe but human safe, because we do have, two aspects of this that may eventually be consumed, and you don't want to put anyone's health at risk. You don't want to put any of that on the line to ever be in that situation. So you want to definitely make sure that you have a lot of these. Polypropylene, it's labeled PP. I have a label right there for you. If you don't know what that label looks like, that is what a lot of fish tanks are made out of, and that won't leach into your water. You don't have to worry about your fish or your plants or anything like that. Some people I hear say it's a little more expensive, and to me that's kind of like a priceless thing. That's not, to me, something that you really want to mess with or go the cheap route. And fiberglass tanks, PVC pipe is what we use a lot of, and we don't ever have to worry about any of that. Like I said, don't use copper, it's really toxic to fish. Alright, and aquaponic system designs, there's a few different things you can do. So like I said, we don't really care how you build your system, we don't care how you do your project. We just want you guys to utilize materials that you may or may not have. We want you to be able to learn what you can from a system that you made or you have already. And that is the purpose of this project, for you guys to learn something that you didn't know before, or to do something in your project that you maybe didn't have going on before. So I know I talked to some, whether that means maybe changing the fish that you use, maybe changing the plants that you grow, changing the design of what you have. We want you to be able to try something new. So that's kind of a big thing. So these are different kinds. I know Jenny touched a little bit about this. I think Matt also touched a little bit about this. I don't think you need that many pictures. It's going to be online. But so media-based grow bed. So that's like this system here. You have your media down here. That's kind of like a flood and drain system. Like I said, the aquariums still work fine. I don't know if people think aquariums are overrated or what, but they were made to hold fish, so you can put fish in them. Raft systems like Doug and Jenny use, or an NFT. And for those of you that don't know, I know I talked to a few that were asking, that's a nutrient film technique, so that's kind of like what Brad Bergerford was talking about a little bit with the strawberries, which if we head back to the greenhouse, you'll see those out there, but they actually just set those up last week. Alright, so let's go over some of these. So a media-based grow bed, you can use multiple different kinds of media. I've heard of all kinds of things. I've heard of things that did work. I've heard of things that I don't know why they ever tried it, because I don't think it would work. I mean, I don't know how good sand would do, but I don't know. That's Doug's shaking his head like, I don't think so. I didn't think it would work, but I don't know. I've never tried it, so I couldn't say no. But we always just stick with Hydroton. That's what we have. You can order it online. That's what I did. And mine shipped to me in 2 days, so it wasn't, you know, super expensive. There's lava rock, sponges, perlite, and vermiculite. Like they said, they kind of mixed into theirs, and that helps hold that moisture. Some pros and cons. So they work great for most hobby aquaponics. So things that we're kind of looking for, especially if you don't have a system and you need to get one or you want to start one, this is a perfect setup. Not only is it small, but you can move it. It's easy to utilize. It's not, you know, a whole lot of components and moving parts that you have to worry about. So it's a great place to start. Like I said, easy to find components, easy to build. I won't say that this was easy to build because I didn't build it, but I watched them build it. They didn't make it look very easy, but I guarantee it's probably not that hard. But I wasn't the one holding the saw, so. And you can grow lots of different plants in a system like this. So I've already started some. You want to start them. If you want to start from seeds, then you'll want to start them like Doug and Jenny do separately and then transplant them over, and that's fine. I've already started a few out in the greenhouse. We have a lot going on, I think, since you guys last saw it out there, but our lettuce, one bed is almost ready to harvest. The other one is about halfway there, but I also planted tomatoes, cucumbers, hot peppers, sweet peppers, Swiss chard. So there's quite a bit going on out there, so we'll kind of check that out. And you can make them as big or as small as you want. So believe it or not, this isn't even the smallest setup of a barrel I've seen, or the smallest setup I've seen. I've seen them small enough to fit on my desk, and I want one, but Onping said no. So, but I'm going to build it, so it'll be fine. All right, cons. So you can build up anaerobic zones. So that's kind of like what Doug talked about. Those are areas that you absolutely do not want. You want to avoid them at all costs. You don't want to have any of those solids sticking in one spot. It makes kind of like a dead zone. That's not something that's good for your plants. It's not something that's good for your fish. Not something that you want. And you may need to clean them out occasionally. It says or use worms. I don't know. I've never had any experience with using worms. I don't know how good or not good they work. Kind of. Mediocre. Okay. So it's all at your own risk. All right. So aquarium system. So this is kind of like what I was talking about. So as small as you want. These guys are just on a desk. Really, really small systems, which is fine. A little bit larger up here. And that's pretty large. So if I were going to put one in my office, I'd probably stick to this one. But it's all up to you guys, kind of what you want to do. Now keep in mind for a project, it's probably going to be a little bit easier to monitor a process and a change if you have more than 2 fish and more than 1 plant. Just keep that in mind. All right, IBC containers. So I've heard a lot of people talking about using these, and that's awesome because if they hold fish, why can't you use them? So intermediate bulk containers. When they're full, they can hold up to 275 gallons. A lot of people cut them in half. So with the top cut off about 175 gallons, that's a lot of fish to be able to fit in a container. So if you can put something like this in your garage and utilize it, or in a barn and utilize it there, that's a really large area, considerably larger than our barrel system. 12 inches of grow bed, and it's inexpensive. So like this, they plumbed it with PVC pipe. So all right, this is kind of like what Doug and Jenny do, the raft method. This method was researched and developed at University of Virgin Islands. Matt talked to me when I very first started working here a lot about this, and gave me a lot of really good information. And I've seen, I'm sure you guys have looked it up online as well, you can grow a lot of different things, but you can grow at a really, really high volume if you really get this going. So it's something that is really interesting to me. We have, you guys have seen them too back in the greenhouse. We have our styrofoam trays that actually have holes in them. And so we fill those with our media and drop our seed down in there. And those are nice, but when we go to harvest our lettuce, we have to pull those out. I have my roots out the bottom, my plant out the top, but I have all this media in the middle that I don't really have an oven that I can stick it in to bake, so I don't really want to reuse that, especially if something's going on in that I don't want in my next round of plants. So there's no way to really sterilize that, so you're back to new. So it's kind of a give and take. But the research, it was researched and commercialized by Nelson and Page. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that if you've done a good bit of research. More pros and cons. So it's great for, like I said, a commercial setup, so high volumes of things. The only thing is usually, I wouldn't really say it's a con, because for a lot of people it really works, but usually growing a specific crop. Like we have lettuce in ours, we do green and red lettuce, and if you stick with one thing and that works for you, that's perfect. I've heard of people growing as much kale as they can even think of, but if you can sell it and you have a market for it and that works for you, then that's great. So some more pros is you can do a small system or you can do a large system. So you can get a pretty high yield out of either. 100 pounds of fish for 925 heads of lettuce. That's a lot of lettuce, even for a small system. If you think of a big system, 194,000 heads of lettuce. So if you have a market for that, that's fantastic. I don't think I could even imagine eating that much lettuce, or all of Columbus eating that much lettuce. But I don't live there, so they probably eat it a lot more than I do. But all right, and then another con is it requires extensive filtration methods. So Doug and Jenny talked about they have air in their grow beds. We don't have that in ours, and I'm starting to wonder why, because our beds are a mess. But you guys will see that. We'll go back there. All right, NFT. So this was the one that I kind of mentioned before. So nutrient film technique. So some of the pros is the materials are readily available. There's more precise growing conditions, and there's no real concern for pH changes related to your media, just because you don't really have a whole lot there. You can kind of tell these plants are really just sitting in what kind of looks like a gutter, and that's literally what they used for their system they put in last week was a gutter. So, I mean, if you have the resources and that's something that you can utilize, and that's perfect. They just built stands for theirs, so we'll check it out on our way back there. Again, I don't know if I would really say this is a con, but they say it doesn't allow as many crop options. But then again, if you have that crop that works really well for you and you can grow it in high volume, then maybe that's not a con. All right, and Jenny talked about the nitrogen cycle. Thank goodness, because I hate to talk about it, but I will go over it just a second. But I know it's been hit on for probably the 10th time today. I'm sure you guys understand now that you have your major input, and that is the food of the fish, for the fish, and your oxygen into the system. So when your fish excrete ammonia, that ammonia is converted into nitrites, and those nitrites are converted into nitrates. Nitrates are what plants really need to thrive and survive, grow well. So it's kind of a balancing act. I learned that when I first started in our system here. Unfortunately, I learned the hard way. I didn't know that I planted all my plants, and they said, when do you want the fish? I said, bring them at the end of the week. It'll be fine. I'll have water in the tanks. We'll be ready to go. Well, the water was there for the fish, but the plants were not there. So within a day, my fish, were gasping at the top of the water column for air. And I'm a fish person, and I know that's not a good sign. but I'm not a plant person, so I did not know that that was why they were doing that. So if it's something that's new for you, those are things that you're going to really have to learn, and that's kind of what Doug was talking about when he said you walk into your system and you just listen. So that's the first thing that I honestly do when I walk into that system, because normally, unfortunately, when I walk into that system, I don't hear pumps running, and that is not a good thing. So I instantly grab the hose, walk around the side, figure out why my pumps aren't running. They're not running because there's no water in the tank. So I put water in the holding tank, get my pumps running. My fish are doing fine because the oxygen was on. Thank goodness. Tilapia are probably the most forgiving fish. I still need to figure out where they're coming from because there's always one on the floor. But when I figure it out, I'll let you know. All right, so the part you've all been waiting for. Okay, so project guidelines. Now, this will be online, so don't feel like you have to write it down. And I also did print off a sheet for each of you, but you'll have to sign it and turn it back into me on kind of what project you want to do. So for project guidelines, we want you to, first and foremost, write a basic project plan. So I want this to be emailed to me by March 1st. So I know that's not a whole lot of time, but the longer we wait, the more we're going to get through this year before we know it. So it doesn't need to be anything extravagant. It doesn't need to be 10 pages. It doesn't need to tell me all these details and descriptions and pictures and all this stuff, because it's kind of like a rough draft. I just kind of want to know what's going on in your head. What do you want to do for a project? Maybe what kind of fish you want to use, what kind of system you want to use. Just basics. I just need the basics. I don't need a 10-page report. I don't want to read 10-page reports from 33 of you already. I'll do that at the very end, but I don't want to do that right now. So with your basic project plan, we want you to actually tell us which one you want to utilize, whether it's aquaculture or aquaponics. I want you to tell me what kind of system you're going to use. So even if you tell me you're going to use an aquaponic system, I want to know specifically, are you doing a barrel system? Are you doing a media? Are you doing a deep water culture? You know, what are you doing? So we went over a lot of those today, so hopefully that kind of got your mind turning in the right direction to kind of think about those things. Like I said, what fish or what plant species that you're going to select to utilize in your project. If you're doing aquaponics, what kind of plants do you want to grow? If you're doing just aquaculture, what kind of fish are you going to be dealing with? And what are you monitoring? So in your aquaculture system, you know, are you doing DO? Are you doing pH? Are you checking, you know, weight, length? What are you doing with your fish? How many times are you doing it? Kind of what your plan is. And this is just a basic plan, so it can change as your project progresses. You know, if you find something that you wanted to really do, you really wanted to check your DO 5 times a day every single day, and then you got about 2 days into it and realized you didn't want to do that anymore, then maybe you can just cut back to 2 or 3 times a week. That's fine. We want to know goals, risks, and expected outcomes. So what do you think will happen? What do you plan to happen? What are you inputting? Fish, feed, oxygen, water, size of tanks. What are you putting into it? And what do you expect to get out of it? So if you put in 5 little baby fish, what do you think you're going to get out of them? Hopefully 5 fish of some sort. Hopefully you don't lose them all. But if you do, it's okay. It's not an expected outcome. All right, on a rough draft. So about halfway through the year, I put in July 1st, just because we're kind of, we're almost middle of February now. So I want a rough draft of your report. Again, this doesn't need to be anything crazy. It's just a rough draft. I know I had crazy rough drafts due when I was in school, and I didn't like them. These aren't like that. I don't want you to hate this rough draft, but I don't want you to wait to the last minute to do it either. So I will review them, and I can review them with Matt if he's willing to sit down for that long. I can review them with Han Ping if I can find him that day, but it'll probably just be me reviewing them. I may call Doug and Jenny and say, this person wants to do this, do you have any experience with this? Do you think this is a good idea? Do you have recommendations? Do you have opinions? Anything that I can offer them for advice. So I will return that to you with comments and probably red marks and, I'm just kidding. But I want it in an email. So I don't want a written report, because I can't mark up your report today and give it back to you tomorrow. So I need it in an email, because that will allow me to get it back to you much faster. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Same with your basic project plan. I prefer it to be in an email, just so that I can document it and I can take my computer home with me and sit on the couch and do it all night long. Okay? I don't want to sit in the office forever and do it. But your final written report. So this is something that someone was a little confused about. I want you to know you have a final written report. You also have an oral presentation on the very last day. It's graduation. So I'm not even going to really call it an oral presentation, because there's 33 of you, and the most time you get is probably 5 minutes. So tell me what you did, what you learned, why you did it, what your outcome was, maybe things that you did that you wouldn't have done before, things that you learned that you wouldn't have learned before. I just want it to be a brief overview of your final written report. Now, your final written report, we didn't put a length on it. I'm not going to tell you it needs to be 10 pages. I'm not going to tell you it needs to be 2 pages. But I want you to put as much detail into that report as you think it takes for you to tell me what you started with, what you went through that process with, and what your outcome was of your entire project. So however detailed you think that needs to be, I'm not going to grade you on how long your report is. I'm not going to grade you on how great spelling you have. It's fine. I just want to know that you guys went into this with an idea. You were able to learn new things, go through the process of what it takes, because this is a starter project, but it's also a start for a lot of you of something that can turn into a business. So we want to see that you went through those appropriate steps and trials and risks and learning experiences that it takes, that, if you can do that on a small scale, you might be a little better off to do it when you have 5 fish in a tank than when you have 1,000 fish in a tank. So we just want to see that process of learning. So your final written report, I want in an email by our final workshop day. That's December 9th. So before you show up, hopefully, I don't necessarily want it the morning of December 9th. I'll take it, but I prefer not. But I need your written report in an email December 9th. Your 5-minute oral presentation, I put PowerPoint on there for graduation. If you don't want to do a PowerPoint, that's fine. If you think you can get up and just talk about, what you did and what you learned and why you did it, I don't care if you have note cards, anything like that. We just want to know what you did, kind of your experience and what process you went through. If you want to do a PowerPoint, some people like having a PowerPoint to back up what they're saying, that's fine. Or if you have a lot of pictures, I love pictures. If you want to show me 100 pictures, you only have time for 5 minutes though. Keep that in mind. But I need it in an email. So for your oral presentation format, as well as your written format, if you really think you need it, I can send you an outline, but realistically, I kind of covered everything that I want covered, everything that we expect to see in your report. So however detailed you feel like you need to be, I'll leave that up to you guys. Now, if you are working in a group and you have your project, you can present together in your oral presentation, that's fine. If you want to write your report together, that's fine, but I need a separate copy from each of you if you're in a group. Separate copy. That way I have documents for every single person. Okay? Alright, so those are the guidelines for your project, no matter what project you do, whether you do a barrel or a bucket or a tank, those are the guidelines, no matter what you're doing. So now we have options. Alright, so the 3 options that we came up with that I feel covers pretty much everyone in this room, and if it doesn't, or you have a problem, you can talk to me later on, that's fine, we'll figure it out. I know I've talked to a lot of you about all sorts of crazy stuff. If you don't have land and you're going to get it, or you don't have a project but you're going to start it, and I get it. I just need a project by December. It'll be fine. But 1, utilizing an existing system. So think about half of you already have a small system that you want to utilize. That's fine. You can utilize the system that you have wherever it is. We don't have a problem with that, but like I said before, if you're going to utilize a system you already have, whether it's a pond, whether it's an aquaponics system, whether it's your shrimp, whether it's anything, we just ask that you maybe do, well, not maybe, you need to do something different. So whether it's, change an aspect of your project, whether you try a different plant, whether you try different fish, whether you try monitoring different data that you didn't normally do, all of those things, we just want you to change it up a little bit and show us that you went out of your comfort zone to learn something new. Is fair enough? Alright, so if you don't have a system already, you can construct a pilot system, but we prefer it be where you're located so that you have access to it. It can be here if you need it to be here, but you're not going to be here. You're going to be somewhere else. So chances are when you come here, you're not going to want to spend a whole lot of extra time after 4 o'clock to hang around and check the lengths on your fish and check your DO in your system back in our greenhouse. You're going to want to go. So wherever you are, if you feel like you could utilize that better, I think you could. We prefer it to be where you are. Now, I understand that for not everyone, that may not be an option for some of you, and I understand that. If you don't have the materials or the means or the time to spend outside, I get it. So, if that's not an option, we will allow you to utilize our projects here. We have ponds here, and we have an aquaponics system here. So, if you can't do it outside here and you have to do it here, you have 2 options. You can do our aquaculture project, and that's utilizing our ponds outside. They have some yellow perch stuff going on. I think that's the main project that you'll be a part of. But I know they do some other stuff out there as well. But you can be on the ponds if that's what you choose, or you can be on our aquaponics system. So I kind of observe that and mark changes and different data, and I collect all of that every day, if not every other day. So when you come, you will do that while you are here. So it's kind of up to you. It's your project, how much time you want to put into it. I'm not saying I'm going to grade you on a scale from A to C, hopefully no lower. But how much time you put into it will reflect on what your project is, and truthfully will reflect on how well you do in the future. Because if you don't take the time to do it now, how much time are you going to take when you have to spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day in your system, if that's your business? So just keep that in mind. We want you to be able to make those flaws and mistakes and trials and errors now rather than later. Okay, so does everybody understand the 3 options And if you don't feel like you fall into one of these, you can talk to me. That's fine. We'll figure something out. I promise. All right, so system maintenance. These are just some small things I'm going to run over just real quick before we actually head out to the greenhouse, or before we go over this thing and then head to the greenhouse. So I recommend you feed your fish daily and monitor your fish health daily. I feel like that should be a rule of thumb. If anybody feels it's not, come talk to me. Okay, so I know some people that don't feed their fish every day, they feed them every other day. That's fine if that's what you want to do. But you need to realize that everyone has a different outlook on it. I do the same thing that Doug does. When I walk into my system, I grab a handful of feed and I throw it in there. If they eat it up, that's fine. I'll feed them more. If they don't, I'm not going to feed them anymore because I don't want that food sitting in my system, draining down into where my plants are and just sitting in there. That's not something that you want in your system. Testing water quality every other day for the first month and then about once a week or as needed. That's kind of a general rule of thumb. I've worked at hatcheries and we check every aspect of water quality every single day, sometimes twice a day. And if you want to do that, that's fine. I'm not saying it's necessary, but I wouldn't suggest only checking it once a month because I don't think you're going to have fish by the end. So keep that in mind. As needed, clean out. If you have a filter, you need to clean that. Clean maybe your tanks, your tubes, water pumps, grow bed media. But you don't want to, like what Doug and Jenny were talking about, you don't want to completely drain your system and drain your grow beds and drain your troughs and things like that, and you're flushing all that good bacteria out. You don't want to do that. So you want to keep your system going. You just want to keep the parts that you utilize in your system clean. So that will prevent a lot of headache later on. If you're doing the aquaponics side of things, you want to make sure that you're checking your plant health. You can trim back your plants if you need to, harvest or take cuttings. So I have peppers back there, tomatoes back there, cucumbers. They're about less than a centimeter tall, but I guarantee when they get older, we're going to be trimming some things back on those. You don't really want branching going all over the place. If you just have one or two main stems, that's ideal. Alright, check plants for bugs or for nutrient deficiencies. Something I realized this morning, I talked to Doug about, we have a lot of gnats in our greenhouse right now, so I just noticed over the past few days. So we're going to have to figure out, I think we kind of figured out maybe what was going on, but we're going to have to try a few different things to see what we can do to help that out. So just keep an eye on what's going on in your system. Just be mindful and be observant of what's going on. Because the one time that you don't check or you don't pay attention will be the one time that really gets you. Does anyone have any questions on projects that they want to ask me now? Alright, so barrelponics. So kind of it's self-explanatory. It's a system that is kind of a ebb and flow, flood and drain system. We use media in this system, obviously made out of barrels. Okay, read that far? Alright, so this is just kind of a system startup checklist. So if you don't have a system and you've never had to kind of go through these steps before, this is probably a really good place to start. So once you decide on a type and a size of system, then you can maybe start building. I don't suggest building anything until you have done your research, looked online. There's tons of different types of systems that you can build just out of barrels. So don't think this is the only barrel system that you can build. There's tons of them out there. I don't really care which one you use. I don't care if you use a barrel or a bucket. I don't want you to use a bucket, but just make a project. Alright, so I suggest you design, do some research, figure out what parts you need, plan it out. I feel that, you know, the whole, what is it, think twice, cut once kind of thing going on. Okay?
Measure twice, cut once.
There you go. That's fine. That's fine. So I saw my guys put this together I'm not sure that they measured twice or thought twice. They cut a lot of times. But I'm thankful because they got me a system. So I'm just saying, just think about it, okay? All right, so you want to fill your system with water and circulate it for normally at least a week. So that just kind of gives your system some time to get established. I wouldn't suggest putting your media in your grow bed here or in your tank barrel and throwing your fish right in bottom and starting the whole process right away, because it's going to be kind of a shock to your fish. Your system's not really going to be set up. You're going to have different things going all over the place. So just put some water in the tank, let it circulate some, let it do its thing, so that you know before you have fish in there and lives on the line that it's going to work. Okay. So like I said, you'll want to fill your system wherever you get your water. That's fine. You know, like Doug said, if you guys need water, you're more than welcome to it. But you can add your plants to your system and watch them grow. But you wanted to monitor your water quality, water changes. Just kind of keep an eye. I know some of you are concerned that you don't have a DO meter, or you don't have, you know, maybe a pH meter. Some of those things you can get at a pet store for fairly cheap. pH strips, I know, aren't really all that expensive. I won't make it required that you check your DO and check your pH and check all these things that you need a meter for or you may not need a meter for. I'll leave that up to you on how detailed you want to get, and that's also up to the amount of money that you have to put into it. So I'm not going to judge how much dollars you want to put towards this. That's up to you. Okay? So I don't need hard data. I just need, I don't want to say trends, but maybe other types of data, like I explained to you. You know, if you don't have a DO meter, at least be checking other aspects of your system. Okay? All right, so some of the barrel designs that you will find online, like I said, I've seen a whole bunch of different things. This is like the chop system that I explained before. So they just took the top of the barrel, and it doesn't look like they cut that one off, but maybe cut another one off. But they literally flip it over, and that becomes the bed that you grow your plants in. That sits right on top of the rest of the barrel that holds your fish. So that's up to you how big you want to make this hole on the side. It's going to be you reaching your arm in there to feed your fish or maybe check on them. I don't recommend that you handle your fish a whole lot. I know some of you want to do weights and measurements and stuff like that, and that's fine maybe when you first put your fish in and when you take them out. But I wouldn't suggest handling them a whole lot because you're just going to stress them out, especially if you only have a few. If you have 5 fish and you kill 3, your odds aren't that great. Okay? All right, so here's some more systems that we were kind of looking at. I believe, Doug and Jenny, yours is kind of like this one over here. But this one is just, has wood around it. It's just kind of, I don't want to say fenced in, but held together. And this one is like that chop system as well, except for it's just got the 2 halves sitting, or the 2 pieces sitting up on a platform. If you want to do it that way, that's fine. I have also seen it just like this one here at the bottom, except for instead of using wood like this, they just had cement blocks up one side, up the other side. Their fish set in the middle. It had a brace around it. You know, if you want to do something like that, that's fine. You guys are going to be the ones monitoring it and kind of going through that process, so that's up to you. Just maybe if you have any questions on what might work or what may not work as well, I'm sure we'd be more than happy to help you with that. Okay? So this is, if you want to build a barrel system, this is the process that we went through. I'll go through it fairly quick so we can get out to the greenhouse. It wasn't a whole lot that went into it. Like I said, they made a lot of cuts, but I think they were just small pieces. So But you just need one barrel for the bottom. For the system that I'm going to demonstrate for you guys is this one right here. So you need a whole barrel for the bottom, and you need a half barrel for the top. So just keep that in mind when you go to buy barrels. If you want to do this system, you need 2 barrels. If you want to do the other one, where you cut the top off and flip it, you just need 1. So it's up to you. We got these barrels at Rural King for 20 bucks each. I do highly recommend, though, when you bring them back, try and keep in mind or make yourself aware, maybe even before you buy them, what was in that barrel before you buy it. Because that could make a very big difference on your fish or your plants or your water levels and your water chemistry. So just keep that in mind. I have no idea what was in ours, but they didn't look, and they cut the barrel in half, and we had hot pink syrup running down the hallway, and the whole building smelled like pink yum yum for probably all last week. Okay, so I don't know if it was like a bubble gum something, but it stunk. So just keep that in mind. All right, so Doug was more than generous to help me with a supply list to kind of mock the system that they have already. The only difference between their system and the system that we built is we had this one just turned sideways, so parallel with our bottom barrel. Their system has 2 halves. One sits right here and the other one sits right next to it. So keep that in mind. The only reason that we did it this way is so that we can push these up against the wall in the greenhouse and they don't take up a whole lot of space. So that was our main reason. It was kind of hard to convince Han Ping to take out a grow bed and replace it with a bunch of barrels that took up the same amount of room. So I just decided to do the half on top and push it up against the wall to save some space. So if space is an issue, maybe keep that in mind as well. So we had our 2 barrels, air pumps with an air stone for your fish. We just got a small pump, this guy right here. It's a submergible pump. So all we did was take this and plugged it in. Keep that in mind too. We didn't realize we don't have very much electric in the greenhouse, so we're going to have to do some rewiring. Okay, so keep that in mind. But we just dropped this pump down in here. Connected to this pump is this hose. And this was just the hose that they bought that fits this pump. All you do is connect this hose to this pump. When you drop this down in here, all we did was run this hose up the side and just put it right in the top of our barrel. So that gives you a constant inflow of water. It's constantly pumping through this pump. Okay, does that make sense? So you'll drop this pump down in here. That's fine. Okay, so that is your inflow. I've seen people cut notches in the side of their barrel so that they can put their hose in there. I've seen them run PVC pipe up with elbows so it goes right down in there. If you want to do that, that's fine. You don't have to do the hose. You can do whatever you think is easier. I've seen them run hose from the outflow. I've seen them run PVC pipe and elbows. So it's something that you'll just kind of have to mess with and figure it out. And we can help you with that as well. So some of these other supplies are really the plumbing aspects of what it took to build this system. So Doug's and Jenny's was just a little bit different than what we set ours up as. So what we did with ours is we had what they call a bell siphon, and that's what drains your system. So for those of you who don't know, I'll go over this in a second in the slides. So this is the bell siphon in here. So what it does is this is your constant inflow and your water has to get out somehow. So the way that we set up our bell siphon is we drilled a hole in the bottom of our barrel. You can do it in the middle, you can do it at one end or the other. I chose to do it at one end because you have this big guard that has to sit over your bell siphon to protect it from media and to be able to create the actual siphon itself. And if that's in the middle of your grow bed, it could take up some room that you may have plants in the middle. So I just kind of shifted it to one end. So we drilled a hole here, and we put this fitting in here. And I'm going to explain this fairly simple. So we put our fitting in there. We just took a piece of PVC pipe that threads down into our fitting. So this is just a straight stand pipe. So when we say stand pipe, we're just referring to this piece of PVC pipe. So this sits in there, threads into that fitting. This is just a piece of 4-inch PVC pipe with a cap on it. It's a snug cap though, it's not loose, so keep that in mind. And what we did is we sliced some rivets all the way around this bottom. So the way that it works with a bell siphon is it's kind of like a suction that creates. So when your barrel is filling up higher and higher and higher, what happens is the water starts to go in the bottom of this PVC pipe. This one is inside of it. So as it's going in these slots, it goes up, 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 till it hits the top of this standpipe inside of this guard. When it hits the top of that standpipe, that piece of PVC pipe, it wants to be pulled back down. It wants to drain out of the system because there's no more air left in here. It's just pumping with water. So once that happens, once it breaks the top of this PVC pipe, it's going to almost create that suction, that siphon, and it will pull that water back down, and it just drains straight out the bottom of your top barrel back into your bottom barrel. And it will drain your entire barrel all the way down to as low as you have these notches. So keep that in mind when you're making this. If you want your water level to be this low, that's where you want your notches. If you want to keep 2 or 3 inches of water, which you don't, in your barrel, then you'll make your notches higher. But what those indicate is where the air is going to get into those notches and break that siphon. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay.
Are those two pipes the same length, or?
What's that?
Are those two pipes the same length?
Okay, good thing you brought up length. So you want this one to be at least, with your fitting, this fitting, you want it to be at least a 1/2 inch or 1 inch lower than the top of your barrel, because this is going to be the level that your water fills up to in your barrel before it breaks over the edge of this PVC pipe and goes back down. So if you have this higher than the edge of your barrel, you're going to overflow your barrel. Does that make sense? So I'll kind of go through just a few of these steps here with you. So just to make things fairly simple, we started with one barrel, we cut it in half. That created our top half. We took the second barrel and we cut a big rectangle out of it. This is where we're going to put our fish. So however big you want an opening, just keep in mind you don't want your fish jumping out or water coming out. So don't cut a huge opening. You don't want to cut it in half. And like I said, make sure you rinse your barrels out. So next we built a stand. This stand needs a little help. So I just kind of told them I need a stand, I need it to be this, this, and this, and I gave them the plans. And they gave me this, this, and this, which is okay because it works for what we need it for, but what I'm pointing to is this piece of lumber that's in front of this barrel, as well as in front on this side. So there's no way for me to get my fish out from underneath of this when there's water and fish in it. So you can get through the front to your fish, but if you ever need to move this, normally you would want that on a separate cart. So like Doug and Jenny have theirs on a small cart, that these pieces of lumber are out further than the edge of the barrel, so you can easily reach under there. pull your barrel straight out the front and do whatever you need to do with your fish in there, or if you need to do any type of change of water, clean it out, any of that, you can do that easily. And you don't ever have to move this piece. Does that make sense? So if I had to, I won't say if I had to redo it because I didn't do it, but if I had to make them redo it, then I would tell them to maybe move these out of the way. But for what we are doing, you know, realistically, we're not going to handle our fish that much, so this is fine for what we need.
I don't know what that dim stuff is. All
What? Yeah. Throwing all those thems around, I forgot. Okay, so we built that stand, and that's, you know, that was fine for us. We have wheels on the bottom of ours, so we can lock to, we can swivel it, we can pull it out, whatever we need to do with it. But we decided on locking wheels so that it wasn't moving all around when we were trying to just push it straight backwards. Some of those wheels can get a little tough sometimes. Okay, like I said, we drilled a hole in the top of our barrel up here, and that's what created our siphon. So this is our hole. We put our fitting on there. If you guys can all see that. So there's the fitting. And the only thing that's on this side is the other side of the fitting screwed in with an exit for this PVC pipe. So you can put in another piece of PVC pipe that comes down with an elbow, so you can turn it towards wherever your fish tank is. That way, if you ever have to move your fish tank, I've seen them with hoses on there before, so that way when you do move your fish tank, your hose goes with it. You don't have to worry about stopping your pump and then restarting it if you have to move it.
If you have to go buy this stuff, it's called a bulkhead setting, it goes on the inside.
There you go.
The male of that.
So that's everything that's on that supply list that was on that first slide. Alright, so I showed you guys how to create the bell siphon. So, you know, there wasn't a whole lot that went into that. You want to connect your PVC pipe to the bottom of the drain like I just showed you, so that way it's coming out the bottom of your barrel, right there, back down into your fish tank. You want to make sure that it's either, Doug didn't recommend straight down, but maybe with an elbow to help with that siphon. That way it's not just going straight down. I guess maybe it's a little easier to break the siphon that way. So just keep that in mind. And like we said, it may be something that you have to try and you know, figure out. Alright, so for a simple understanding of that bell siphon, this is your drain here. This is your fitting here, the bottom of your barrel, your holes, and your cover. This is the bell of the siphon, and this is your standpipe. So the water comes in through these holes, floods up through here on both sides, and as soon as it breaks this, it pulls back down through that pipe, that standpipe, and drains back down into your bottom barrel. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Alright, so you want to fill your bottom tank with water and put your pump in there with your hose leading to that top barrel like I showed before. You can wait for the tank to siphon a few times before you continue, just to make sure that your siphon works. The first siphon that we did worked really well. Matt made this really weird siphon. It didn't work as well, but it still worked. I don't know. He would probably recommend it because he made it. I don't think I would recommend it because I didn't make it, but you can try different things. I've seen siphons made with elbows before that just go down in the middle of a pipe. So there's multiple ways that you can make it, but the one that we used worked, so we didn't want to mess with that anymore, really. Alright, so allow your system to run for that 1 week. You can use the water out of our system if that's what you want to do. That's fine. You'll let that bacteria become established, and then you can add your fish and your plants to the system. You'll want to start your plants seeded and then transplant them. If that's what you plan to do, that's fine. We have plants here that you can use that I already started growing. If you want to, that's fine. So this system cost us right at $150. The most expensive part was probably the pump. Along with the pump would be your hydroton, is what we used. They're just small little clay pebbles. You don't want them too small because you don't want them to get caught in your bell siphon, so keep that in mind. You don't probably want anything smaller than 4 millimeters. So I got that online and it works fine. But that's what you will put in your barrel around your bell siphon to hold it in place. You'll also probably want another piece of tubing a little bit bigger than the bell on your siphon. That way, in case something ever does get caught in your bell siphon or you need to pull it out and check it or move it or clean it, when you pull that out, you don't want all that media to rush in around your standpipe. So it's easier if you have just a piece of tubing around that to kind of guard it from that media when you need to get to it. All right, this stuff you can read online later on. It's just some simple calculations to help you get started. So your media system calculations. There's also general feeding calculations to help you with how much you need to feed your fish depending on the amount of pounds of fish you have in your system. So you guys can go back and kind of look at all that. I do want to say don't rely on that math every time. You know, like I said, I throw a handful of feed. If they eat it, then I'll feed them more. If they don't, I'm not going to feed them more. You don't want that feed just going to waste sitting there. And some tips and tricks that I ran across that I felt were pretty good to utilize. Wash your media before you put it in your system. That way you don't have clouded water that you have to wait for it to filter through multiple times. If you wash it off first, you can avoid a lot of that. Test the pH of the media that you plan to use. You can use worms, you can use vitamin C, you can break down those solids and reduce those anaerobic zones with those worms. We talked about that before. I guess maybe sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you know, just you can try that if you'd like. But you want to make sure that you never use a cleaning product, pesticides, fertilizers, anything like that that will get back into your plants or into your fish. And this is my last slide, I promise. I saw this, which I don't really know how true this is, Doug or Jenny, maybe you know. I heard if you get aphids on your plants, you can spray them with diluted vinegar and water solution, and that will help get rid of them.
Tried with vinegar and water, but wouldn't do it with fish.
Okay.
Some people use soapy water, but no one uses soap around fish.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. Okay. All right. Avoid direct sunlight on your fish tanks. We have that black felt over top of our fish tanks, and that kind of helps. You don't want to change more than 1/3 of the water in your tank at one time. It's stressful to the fish. It can get rid of the good bacteria that you want in your system. You don't really want to just flush that out. Just like Bill talked about that guy flushing his system out. You don't want to flush all those good things that were in your system down the drain because they're really hard to get back. Cover your outdoor plants in frost. You know, that's common sense, I would hope. And make sure that you have backup power if anything goes out. All right, any questions on that stuff? Awesome. Let's rock and roll.